The story of Stonehenge begins not with the first Sarsen stone dragged across the chalk downs, but with the formation of the landscape itself millions of years before human feet ever touched this corner of southern England. The Salisbury Plain stretches across Wiltshire like a vast geological stage, its foundation laid down during the Cretaceous period approximately 100 million years ago, when this region lay beneath a warm, shallow sea. As microscopic marine organisms died and settled on the seabed, they gradually formed the thick layers of chalk that would become the bedrock of one of Britain's most distinctive landscapes. The chalk formation, part of the larger geological structure known as the Wessex Basin, created a landscape uniquely suited to human habitation and monument construction. Unlike the clay-heavy soils found elsewhere in Britain, chalk provides excellent drainage while remaining stable enough to support massive stone structures. The porous nature of chalk allows rainwater to percolate downward, creating underground aquifers that feed springs and rivers, a crucial factor that would attract human settlement for millennia. The River Avon, which flows just 2 miles east of the Stonehenge site, owes its existence to these chalk aquifers, providing a reliable water source that made permanent settlement possible. The geological advantages of the Salisbury Plain extended beyond mere practicality. The chalk bedrock lies relatively close to the surface across much of the area, making it easier for ancient peoples to quarry and shape. More importantly, the underlying chalk provided a stable foundation that could support structures weighing hundreds of tons without the settling and shifting that would plague monuments built on softer soils. The builders of Stonehenge, whether they fully understood the geological principles or simply observed the landscape's behaviour over generations, chose their site with remarkable precision. Archaeological evidence reveals that humans first arrived in this landscape during the Mesolithic period, roughly 8000 BC, as the last ice age retreated and Britain's climate warmed. These early inhabitants were nomadic hunter-gatherers who moved seasonally across the landscape, following game herds and exploiting different resources as they became available throughout the year. Excavations at nearby Blick Mead, less than 2 miles from Stonehenge, have uncovered one of Britain's most significant Mesolithic sites, revealing continuous human occupation spanning over 3,000 years. The Mesolithic inhabitants of the Salisbury Plain lived in small, mobile groups, rarely exceeding 30 individuals. They constructed temporary shelters using wooden posts and animal hides, structures that have left minimal archaeological traces compared to the stone monuments that would follow. However, their impact on the landscape was profound in ways that extended far beyond their physical footprint. These hunter-gatherers possessed an intimate knowledge of their environment, understanding the seasonal patterns of plant growth, animal migration, and resource availability with a precision that modern humans struggle to comprehend. Evidence from Mesolithic sites across the Salisbury Plain reveals a sophisticated toolkit adapted to the specific challenges and opportunities of the chalk downland environment. Flint tools, napped from nodules found naturally in the chalk, dominated their technology. The quality of flint available in this region was exceptional, dense, fine-grained, and capable of holding an extremely sharp edge. Archaeological assemblages from sites like Blick Mead include thousands of worked flint pieces, scrapers for processing hides, burins for working bone and antler, and the distinctive microliths that served as arrow points and knife blades. The hunting strategies employed by these Mesolithic groups were equally sophisticated. The open nature of the chalk downland, with its rolling hills and scattered woodland, favoured hunting techniques that relied on driving game toward natural or constructed barriers. Archaeological evidence suggests that Mesolithic hunters used fire to manage vegetation, creating clearings that attracted grazing animals and made hunting more predictable. This early landscape management represented humanity's first significant alteration of the Salisbury Plain environment. Around 4000 BC, the archaeological record reveals a gradual but fundamental transformation in human society across the Salisbury Plain. The transition from Mesolithic hunter-gatherer lifestyles to Neolithic farming communities occurred not as a sudden revolution, but as a process spanning several centuries. The first Neolithic settlers brought with them domesticated cattle, sheep, and pigs, along with knowledge of cereal cultivation, wheat and barley varieties that could thrive in the chalk soil conditions. The shift to farming required a fundamentally different relationship with the landscape. Where Mesolithic groups had moved seasonally to exploit natural resources, Neolithic farmers needed to establish permanent settlements near their fields and pastures. The chalk downland proved ideally suited to this new way of life. The well-drained soils supported cereal cultivation, while the natural grasslands provided excellent pasture for livestock. The relatively treeless nature of much of the Salisbury Plain meant that less forest clearance was required compared to other regions of Britain. Neolithic settlements on the Salisbury Plain typically consisted of rectangular timber-framed houses with walls of wattle and daub. These structures, substantially larger than Mesolithic shelters, reflected the increased material wealth and social complexity of farming communities. Archaeological excavations have revealed houses measuring up to 15 metres in length, divided into distinct areas for human habitation, food storage and craft activities. The presence of substantial storage facilities, both above-ground granaries and underground storage pits, indicates that these communities were producing agricultural surpluses beyond their immediate needs. The social implications of this agricultural surplus cannot be overstated. For the first time in human history in this region, some individuals could specialise in activities other than direct food production. Archaeological evidence points to the emergence of skilled craftspeople who produced high-quality pottery, worked flint tools for trade, and created the first monumental architecture. The elaborate polished stone axes found at Neolithic sites across the Salisbury Plain, many made from stone sources hundreds of miles away, demonstrate that these communities participated in extensive trade networks spanning much of Britain and continental Europe. The Neolithic transformation of the Salisbury Plain landscape extended beyond settlement patterns to encompass the first monumental constructions. Long before the iconic trilithons rose at Stonehenge, this landscape was already home to impressive earthwork monuments that reflected the growing social complexity and ritual sophistication of farming communities. The Greater Cursus, a massive linear earthwork stretching nearly 2 miles across the landscape just north of the future Stonehenge site, represents one of the earliest and most impressive of these monuments. Constructed around 3500 BC, the Greater Cursus consists of parallel ditches and banks, defining a corridor approximately 100 metres wide and 2.8 kilometres long. The earthwork required the movement of thousands of tons of chalk, representing a massive communal effort that would have required coordination among multiple communities across the region. The precise function of Cursus monuments remains debated among archaeologists, but their alignment with significant landscape features and astronomical phenomena suggests they served important ritual or ceremonial purposes. The construction of the Greater Cursus demonstrates several crucial developments in Neolithic society on the Salisbury Plain. The scale of the earthwork required not only substantial labour organisation, but also sophisticated surveying techniques to maintain the parallel alignment across nearly 3 kilometres of undulating terrain. Archaeological analysis of the construction sequence reveals that the Cursus was built in planned segments, suggesting a level of project management that implies emerging social hierarchies and specialised leadership roles. Contemporary with the Greater Cursus, numerous other earthwork monuments appeared across the Salisbury Plain landscape. The Lesser Cursus, located closer to the future Stonehenge site, followed similar design principles but on a smaller scale. causewayed enclosures, circular earthworks with multiple entrance gaps, served as gathering places for communities scattered across the wider landscape. Windmill Hill, located 20 miles north of Stonehenge, represents the largest and most complex of these causewayed enclosures, with multiple concentric rings of ditches and banks encompassing nearly 21 acres. The proliferation of monument construction during the early Neolithic period reflects profound changes in how human communities understood and interacted with the landscape. These earthworks were not merely functional structures but sacred spaces that embodied complex beliefs about the relationship between the living, the dead, and the natural world. The careful positioning of monuments in relation to prominent landscape features, hilltops, river valleys, and natural clearings suggests that Neolithic communities perceived the Salisbury Plain as a sacred landscape requiring appropriate ritual attention. Archaeological evidence from excavations within and around these early monuments reveals the complexity of Neolithic ritual practices. Deposits of deliberately broken pottery, carefully placed animal bones, and human cremations indicate that these sites served as focal points for ceremonies involving entire regional communities. The discovery of exotic materials, polished stone axes from distant sources, amber beads from the Baltic, and pottery styles from continental Europe demonstrates that these ritual gatherings also facilitated trade and cultural exchange across vast distances. The long barrows that dot the Salisbury Plain landscape provide additional insight into Neolithic society and beliefs. These elongated burial mounds, typically oriented east-west and measuring between 30 and 120 metres in length, served as communal tombs for multiple generations. The internal structure of long barrows reveals sophisticated architectural knowledge, with carefully constructed stone or timber chambers designed to remain accessible for repeated use over centuries. The West Kennet Long Barrow, though located outside the immediate Stonehenge area, exemplifies the monumental scale and technical sophistication of these Neolithic burial sites. The positioning of long barrows across the Salisbury Plain follows clear patterns that reflect Neolithic understanding of landscape symbolism. Most barrows occupy prominent positions visible from considerable distances, serving as permanent markers of territorial claims and ancestral presence. The relationship between barrow placement and natural landscape features, ridgelines, river valleys, and areas of particularly fertile soil suggests that these monuments functioned as both burial sites and territorial markers, defining community boundaries and resource rights. By 3000 BC, the Salisbury Plain had been transformed from a landscape of scattered Mesolithic camps to a complex ritual landscape dotted with monuments that reflected the growing social complexity and spiritual sophistication of Neolithic farming communities. The cursus monuments, causewayed enclosures, and long barrows created a sacred geography that would profoundly influence the placement and design of later monuments, including Stonehenge itself. This earlier phase of monument building established the Salisbury Plain as a landscape of particular spiritual significance, attracting pilgrims and ritual participants from across Britain and continental Europe. The archaeological record reveals that by the late Neolithic period, the area around the future Stonehenge site had become a focal point for ritual activity of unprecedented scale and complexity. The density of monuments within a 5-mile radius of Stonehenge exceeds that found anywhere else in prehistoric Europe, suggesting that this particular location held special significance that transcended local community needs. The reasons for this concentration remain partially mysterious, but the geological, geographical and cultural factors that made the Salisbury Plain attractive to its earliest inhabitants clearly continued to influence human behaviour as societies became more complex and monument construction more ambitious. The transformation of the Salisbury Plain into a sacred landscape during the late Neolithic period reached its culmination around 3100 BC with the construction of the first Stonehenge. This initial monument bore little resemblance to the towering stone trilithons that dominate modern perceptions of the site. Instead, the earlier Stonehenge consisted of a carefully planned earthwork enclosure that would serve as the foundation for over 1,500 years of continuous ritual use and architectural evolution. The first builders approached their task with remarkable precision, creating a nearly perfect circular enclosure measuring approximately 110 metres in diameter. The construction process began with the excavation of a circular ditch, dug to an average depth of 2 metres and width of 6 metres, following the natural contours of the chalk downland. The excavated chalk was piled on the inner side of the ditch to form a bank that originally stood nearly 2 metres high. This bank and ditch arrangement, known to archaeologists as a henge monument, followed a distinctive pattern found at numerous sites across Neolithic Britain, but the Stonehenge example demonstrated unusual sophistication in its execution. Archaeological excavation of the original ditch has revealed crucial details about the construction process and the people who carried it out. The builders used antler picks and shoulder blade shovels from cattle and red deer, tools that left distinctive marks on the chalk walls of the ditch. Radiocarbon dating of these antler tools provides the most reliable evidence for the monument's construction date, clustering around 3100 BC. The ditch was not excavated as a continuous effort, but rather in discrete segments, each measuring approximately 10-15 metres in length. This segmented construction technique suggests that different groups or families were responsible for specific portions of the work, a pattern that reflects the communal nature of the project while maintaining distinct social identities within the larger effort. The entrance to this first Stonehenge was positioned on the northeast side of the enclosure, marked by a 10-metre gap in both the ditch and bank. This entrance alignment was not arbitrary, but carefully oriented toward the point on the horizon where the sun rises on the summer solstice. The precision of this alignment, accurate to within a degree, demonstrates that the builders possessed sophisticated astronomical knowledge and considered celestial observations central to the monument's purpose. Additional smaller gaps in the earthwork located on the south and southwest sides provided secondary access points that may have served specific ritual functions. Within the circular enclosure, the builders created one of the most intriguing features of the entire Stonehenge complex, the Aubrey holes. Named after the 17th century antiquarian John Aubrey, who first identified them, these 56 circular pits form a precise circle approximately 88 metres in diameter, positioned roughly halfway between the inner edge of the bank and the centre of the monument. Each Aubrey hole measures between 0.8 and 1.2 metres in diameter and extends to a depth of up to 1 metre below the original ground surface. The regularity of their spacing, approximately 5 metres apart around the entire circumference, demonstrates the mathematical sophistication of their creators. The original function of the Aubrey holes has generated extensive scholarly debate, with archaeological evidence supporting multiple simultaneous uses. Excavations have revealed that many of the holes contain cremated human remains, making them among Britain's earliest known cremation cemeteries. The cremations were not random deposits, but carefully placed burials that accumulated over several centuries. Analysis of the cremated bone fragments indicates that both men and women of various ages were interred in the Aubrey holes, suggesting that access to burial within the monument was not restricted to a single social class or gender. The cremation burials within the Aubrey holes reveal sophisticated mortuary practices that extended far beyond simple disposal of the dead. Many of the cremated remains show evidence of careful sorting and selection, with only specific bones chosen for burial, while others were presumably disposed of elsewhere. Some holes contain multiple individuals whose remains had been mixed together, indicating that communal burial practices were an important aspect of the site's ritual function. The presence of cremated animal bones, particularly cattle and pig, alongside human remains suggests that feasting and sacrifice were integral components of the burial ceremonies. Beyond their mortuary function, the Aubrey holes may have served astronomical purposes that complemented the monument's solar alignment. The number 56 has astronomical significance, representing the number of years required for the moon's rising and setting positions to complete a full cycle and return to their starting points. This lunar cycle, known to modern astronomers as the Metonic cycle, would have been observable to careful sky watchers over multiple generations. If the Aubrey holes functioned as a lunar calculator, with markers moved from hole to track the moon's complex movements, they would represent one of humanity's earliest attempts to create a permanent astronomical computer. Recent archaeological work has identified evidence for wooden posts that once stood in many of the Aubrey holes. These posts, based on the size and shape of the post holes, would have stood approximately 3 meters above ground level, creating a timber circle that enclosed the ritual space within the earthwork. The posts were not permanent installations, but were apparently erected and removed multiple times over the monument's early history. This pattern of post erection and removal may have been tied to specific ceremonies or astronomical events, with the posts serving as temporary markers for ritual activities that occurred at regular intervals. The timber posts within the Aubrey holes were part of a larger wooden architecture that characterised the first Stonehenge. Archaeological evidence points to additional post circles and timber structures within the monument's interior, creating a complex wooden temple that preceded the famous stone arrangements by several centuries. These wooden structures included smaller post circles, linear arrangements of posts, and possibly roofed buildings that provided shelter for ritual activities. The scale and complexity of the timber architecture rivaled that of contemporary wooden temples found elsewhere in Neolithic Europe, demonstrating that the builders of Stonehenge were participating in widespread architectural traditions while adapting them to their specific ritual needs. The cultural context for the first Stonehenge construction lies with the Windmill Hill people, a Neolithic culture named after the causewayed enclosure located 20 miles north of Stonehenge. These communities had established themselves across the Wessex region by 3700 BC, bringing with them sophisticated pottery traditions, advanced flint working techniques, and complex ritual practices that would profoundly influence the development of Stonehenge. The Windmill Hill culture represented a mature Neolithic society that had moved beyond the experimental farming of earlier periods to establish stable, prosperous communities capable of undertaking monumental construction projects. Windmill Hill pottery found at Stonehenge and surrounding sites reveals the aesthetic sensibilities and technical capabilities of the monument's builders. These vessels, characterized by round-bottomed bowls and decorated with distinctive patterns created by impressing twisted cords or carved wooden paddles into the clay before firing, demonstrate sophisticated ceramic technology. The pottery styles show strong connections to contemporary cultures across northern France and the Low Countries, indicating that the Windmill Hill people maintained extensive cultural contacts across the English Channel. The presence of pottery made from clay sources located hundreds of miles from Stonehenge suggests that the monument attracted visitors from across Britain and continental Europe from its earliest phases. The flint-working traditions of the Windmill Hill people reached extraordinary levels of sophistication, producing tools and weapons that combined practical functionality with aesthetic excellence. The leaf-shaped arrowheads, characteristic of this period, required exceptional skill to manufacture, with their symmetrical forms and razor-sharp edges representing the pinnacle of Neolithic flint-knapping technology. Many of these arrowheads found at Stonehenge were made from flint sources located far from the monument, including distinctive black flint from the Bearhead quarries in Devon and spotted flint from the Yorkshire Wolds, indicating that specialised toolmakers travelled great distances to contribute to the site's construction and ritual activities. The agricultural practices of the Windmill Hill people provided the economic foundation that made Stonehenge's construction possible. Archaeological evidence from contemporary settlements reveals a mixed farming economy that combined cereal cultivation with cattle, sheep, and pig husbandry. The chalk soils of the Salisbury Plain proved particularly well suited to this agricultural system, supporting higher population densities than most other regions of Neolithic Britain. The agricultural surplus generated by these efficient farming practices freed substantial labour for monument construction, while providing the food resources necessary to support large gatherings of people during building campaigns and ritual ceremonies. The ritual practices of the Windmill Hill culture, as revealed through archaeological investigation of their causewayed enclosures and other ceremonial sites, provide crucial insights into the religious beliefs that motivated Stonehenge's construction. These practices centred on ancestor veneration, seasonal ceremonies tied to agricultural cycles, and complex beliefs about the relationship between the living and the dead. The causewayed enclosures served as gathering places where scattered communities came together for feasting, trading, and ritual activities that reinforced social bonds and cultural identity across the wider region. Evidence from Windmill Hill and other contemporary sites reveals that these gatherings involved elaborate feasting ceremonies that consumed enormous quantities of food and drink. Archaeological deposits contain thousands of cattle bones, representing the remains of communal meals that brought together hundreds or possibly thousands of participants. The scale of these feasts required careful planning and coordination, with communities contributing cattle and other food resources according to their capabilities and social obligations. The feasting debris also includes substantial quantities of pottery vessels, many of which were deliberately broken during the ceremonies, suggesting that vessel destruction was an important ritual act that marks the completion of specific ceremonies. The construction of the first Stonehenge represented the culmination of these Windmill Hill ritual traditions, creating a permanent ceremonial centre that could accommodate the largest gatherings while providing a focus for ancestor veneration and astronomical observation. The monument's design incorporated elements found at earlier causewayed enclosures, the circular earthwork, multiple entrances and internal ritual deposits, while introducing innovations that reflected the growing sophistication of Neolithic religious practices. The addition of the Aubrey holes and their associated timber structures created a more complex ritual space that could accommodate multiple simultaneous ceremonies while maintaining the communal character of earlier monuments. The positioning of Stonehenge within the existing sacred landscape of the Salisbury Plain was carefully considered to maximise its symbolic and practical effectiveness. The monument's location on a slight ridge provides commanding views across the surrounding countryside, while remaining visible from the numerous barrows and other ritual sites that dotted the landscape. This visual connectivity ensured that Stonehenge functioned as the focal point of a larger ceremonial complex that encompassed dozens of individual monuments across several square miles of the Salisbury Plain. The first phase of Stonehenge remained in active use for approximately 600 years, during which time the monument underwent continuous modification and elaboration. The Aubrey holes were repeatedly reopened for additional cremation burials. The timber structures were rebuilt and reconfigured multiple times, and new ritual deposits were added to the ditch and other features. This long period of use and modification demonstrates that Stonehenge served as a living religious centre rather than a static monument, adapting to changing ritual needs while maintaining its fundamental character as a place of ancestor veneration and astronomical observation. Around 2600 BC, the builders of Stonehenge embarked upon one of the most extraordinary logistical achievements of prehistoric Europe. The decision to transport massive stones across 150 miles of challenging terrain from the Preseli Hills of southwestern Wales to Salisbury Plain represents a monumental undertaking that fundamentally transformed both the monument and our understanding of Neolithic society's capabilities. These stones, known today as blue stones due to their distinctive blue-grey coloration when freshly broken or wet, would become the first stone circle erected at Stonehenge, marking a revolutionary departure from the timber and earthwork traditions that had characterised the site for the previous 5 centuries. The geological identification of the blue stone's Welsh origins began in the early 20th century when petrologist Herbert Henry Thomas conducted detailed analysis of stone samples from Stonehenge. Thomas's microscopic examination revealed that the blue stones comprised multiple rock types, including spotted dolerite, rhyolite, and volcanic ash, all of which matched geological formations found exclusively in the Preseli Hills of Pembrokeshire, Wales. This discovery immediately raised profound questions about how and why Neolithic peoples would transport stones weighing between 2 and 4 tons across such vast distances when suitable building materials were readily available much closer to the monument site. Recent archaeological investigations have pinpointed the exact quarry locations where the Stonehenge bluestones were extracted. At Craig Rossi Fallin, excavations led by archaeologist Mike Parker Pearson have uncovered compelling evidence of Neolithic quarrying activities dating to approximately 3000 BC. The site reveals a sophisticated extraction operation where ancient quarrymen exploited natural geological weaknesses in the rock face to remove precisely shaped monoliths. The quarry workers used a combination of fire setting, where controlled fires were built against the rock face and then doused with cold water to create thermal shock fractures, and wooden wedges driven into natural cracks to split away usable stones. The Craig Rossi Fallin quarry site preserves remarkable evidence of the quarrying process through archaeological deposits that accumulated during the extraction operations. Layers of charcoal from the fire setting activities provide radiocarbon dates that cluster around 3000 BC, several centuries before the bluestones arrived at Stonehenge. This temporal gap suggests that the stones were not transported immediately after extraction but may have been used for local monuments in Wales before being moved to Salisbury Plain. Archaeological survey of the surrounding landscape has identified several stone circles and burial chambers constructed from Craig Rossi Fallin dolerite, indicating that the quarry supplied multiple monuments across southwestern Wales. The second major bluestone quarry at Carn Godog, located approximately 1 mile from Craig Rossi Fallin, shows similar evidence of Neolithic extraction activities. This site specialised in producing the distinctive spotted dolerite that forms several of the Stonehenge bluestones. The Carn Godog quarry exploited a natural rock formation where geological processes had created naturally occurring pillars of stone that required minimal shaping to produce monument-ready monoliths. The quarry workers removed these natural pillars by undermining their bases and using controlled collapse techniques to bring them down without fracturing the stone. The transportation of the bluestones from Wales to Salisbury Plain required solving complex logistical challenges that pushed Neolithic technology and organisation to their limits. The most widely accepted transportation theory involves a combined land and water route that took advantage of natural waterways while minimising the distance that the massive stones needed to be dragged over land. The proposed route begins with overland transport from the Preseli quarries to the nearby Nevern estuary, where the stones could be loaded onto rafts or boats for the sea voyage around the Welsh coast. The maritime portion of the Bluestone journey would have followed the Welsh coast eastward to the mouth of the River Severn, then continued up the Severn and its tributary the River Avon to a point near present-day Bath. From there, the stones would have been transferred back to overland transport for the final 30-mile journey across the Chalk Downs to Stonehenge. This route, while still representing an enormous undertaking, avoided the most challenging terrain of the Welsh mountains and English hill country, while utilising the superior carrying capacity of water transport for the majority of the distance. Experimental archaeology has provided valuable insights into the practical challenges of bluestone transport. In 2000, A team led by archaeologist Julian Richards attempted to transport a 3-ton concrete replica of a bluestone using reconstructed Neolithic techniques. The experiment revealed that overland transport required approximately 100 people to move the stone at a rate of less than 1 mile per day over level ground. Rough terrain, hills and river crossings reduced the daily progress to a few hundred meters and required additional personnel for route preparation and obstacle management. The water transport phase proved more efficient, with a replica bluestone successfully transported by raft across Milford Haven, using techniques that could have been available to Neolithic peoples. The logistics of organising a bluestone transport expedition would have required unprecedented levels of social coordination and resource mobilisation. Moving even a single 3-ton stone demanded a workforce of at least 100 individuals, along with additional support personnel responsible for food preparation, route maintenance and equipment management. Transporting the estimated 80 bluestones that eventually reached Stonehenge would have required multiple expeditions spanning several years, each involving hundreds of participants and enormous quantities of food, tools and other supplies. The social implications of the bluestone transport project extend far beyond mere logistics to reveal fundamental aspects of Neolithic society and belief systems. The decision to undertake such an enormous effort to obtain specific stones from a particular location in Wales suggests that the bluestones possess special significance that transcended their practical utility as building materials. The Preseli Hills had been a source of stone axes for over a millennium before the Stonehenge bluestones were quarried, with Preseli axes distributed across Britain and continental Europe as prestige items that conveyed both practical value and symbolic meaning. The cultural significance of the Preseli Hills in Neolithic Wales is evidenced by the concentration of monuments in the region, including stone circles, burial chambers, and ceremonial complexes that created a sacred landscape comparable to Salisbury Plain. The decision to transport bluestones from this established sacred landscape to create a new monument at Stonehenge may reflect complex political and religious relationships between Welsh and English Neolithic communities. Some archaeologists interpret the bluestone transport as evidence of population migration, with Welsh communities physically relocating to Salisbury Plain and bringing their ancestral stones with them to establish continuity with their homeland. Alternative theories suggest that the bluestone acquisition resulted from alliance building between distant communities, with the Welsh stones serving as gifts that cemented political relationships and facilitated cooperation in large-scale monument construction. The enormous effort required to transport the bluestones would have created lasting bonds between the participating communities while demonstrating the power and organisational capabilities of the leaders who orchestrated the project. The arrival of the Welsh stones at Stonehenge would have marked a significant moment in the monument's history, transforming it from a regional ceremonial centre into a site of national or even international significance. The arrangement of the first bluestone circle at Stonehenge demonstrates careful planning and sophisticated understanding of stone circle design principles. The bluestones were erected in a double circle formation, with an outer ring of approximately 60 stones and an inner ring of roughly 20 stones, all positioned within the existing earthwork enclosure. The stones were not arranged randomly, but followed specific patterns that reflected both practical considerations and symbolic meanings. Taller stones were positioned at cardinal points and other astronomically significant locations, while smaller stones fill the intermediate positions to create a visually harmonious composition. Archaeological investigation of the bluestone circle has revealed that the stones underwent multiple rearrangements during their time at Stonehenge. Evidence from stone holes and archaeological deposits indicates that the original double circle configuration was modified several times, with stones being moved, reset, and in some cases removed entirely. These modifications reflect the evolving ritual needs of the monument's users and demonstrate that the stone circle was treated as a living, adaptable structure, rather than a fixed architectural composition. The construction techniques used to erect the bluestone circle show remarkable sophistication in handling and positioning multi-ton stones. The builders excavated carefully shaped holes for each stone, with the hole dimensions precisely calculated to support the stone's weight while maintaining proper alignment. Many of the stone holes show evidence of packing materials, including chalk rubble and smaller stones, that were used to secure the bluestones in their final positions. The precision of the stone placement, with gaps between adjacent stones maintained at consistent intervals around the entire circumference, demonstrates advanced surveying skills and mathematical understanding. The cultural impact of the bluestone circle's completion extended far beyond the immediate Stonehenge site to influence monument construction across Britain. The successful transport and erection of the Welsh stones demonstrated that large-scale stone circle construction was technically feasible, inspiring similar projects at sites throughout the British Isles. The Stonehenge bluestone circle served as a prototype for later stone circle construction, with its design principles and construction techniques copied and adapted at dozens of other sites during the subsequent centuries. The ritual significance of the completed bluestone circle is evidenced by the dramatic increase in artifact deposits and human burials associated with the monument during this period. Archaeological excavations have recovered substantial quantities of pottery, flint tools, and other material culture from context dating to the Bluestone period, indicating intensified ceremonial activity. The pottery assemblages include vessels from across Britain and continental Europe, demonstrating that the monument attracted participants from vast distances who came to participate in ceremonies conducted within the stone circle. The Bluestone period also witnessed changes in burial practices at Stonehenge, with cremation burials becoming more elaborate and numerous. Many of the cremation deposits from this period include grave goods such as bone pins, amber beads, and miniature pottery vessels that indicate increased social differentiation among the monument's users. The presence of cremated remains from individuals whose bone chemistry suggests non-local origins provides direct evidence that Stonehenge had become a pilgrimage destination, attracting visitors from across Britain and beyond. The astronomical functions of the Bluestone Circle built upon and enhanced the solar alignments established during the monument's earlier phases. The careful positioning of specific bluestones at astronomically significant points around the circle suggests that the stone arrangement served as a three-dimensional calendar for tracking solar and lunar cycles. The bluestone's distinctive coloration and varied shapes would have created visual markers that helped observers identify specific astronomical events and their associated ceremonial requirements. The Bluestone Circle period represents a crucial transition in Stonehenge's development, establishing it as Britain's premier ceremonial centre while demonstrating the remarkable organisational capabilities of Neolithic society. The successful completion of the bluestone transport and circle construction provided the foundation for even more ambitious architectural projects that would transform Stonehenge into the monument we recognise today. The Welsh stones, though later overshadowed by the massive Sarsen trilithons, remained an integral part of Stonehenge throughout its active use, serving as tangible links to the monument's Welsh connections and the extraordinary achievement of their transport across prehistoric Britain. The completion of the Bluestone Circle marked only the beginning of Stonehenge's most ambitious transformation. Around 2500 BC, a new generation of builders arrived at the monument with plans that would dwarf all previous construction efforts. These people, archaeologists now recognise as the Beaker culture, brought with them revolutionary technologies, sophisticated social organisation, and an architectural vision that would create one of humanity's most enduring monuments. Their goal was nothing less than the construction of massive stone trilithons, using Sarsen stones quarried from the Marlborough Downs some 20 miles north of Stonehenge, the Sarsen stones that would form the backbone of the new Stonehenge represented a geological resource of exceptional quality and daunting scale. These massive sandstone blocks, formed during the Paleocene epoch approximately 56 million years ago, lay scattered across the Marlborough Downs as remnants of a once continuous cap rock that had been gradually eroded away. The Sarsens varied enormously in size, from relatively modest blocks weighing a few tons to colossal monoliths exceeding 50 tons. The builders of Stonehenge selected only the largest and most regular specimens, choosing stones that could be shaped into the precise dimensions required for their architectural vision. The process of selecting suitable Sarsen stones required extensive survey work across the Marlborough Downs, with teams of specialists examining hundreds of potential blocks to identify those with the proper size, shape and geological integrity. The chosen stones needed to be free from major fractures or geological weaknesses that might cause them to fail under the enormous stresses of construction and long-term weathering. Archaeological analysis of the Stonehenge Sarsens reveals that the builders demonstrated remarkable geological expertise, consistently selecting stones from specific areas of the Downs where the sandstone exhibited optimal characteristics for monumental construction. The transportation of Sarsen stones from the Marlborough Downs to Stonehenge presented logistical challenges that exceeded even the Bluestone transport project in scale and complexity. The largest Sarsen stones, weighing up to 50 tons, required the mobilization of enormous human resources and sophisticated engineering techniques. Experimental archaeology conducted by teams of engineers and archaeologists has demonstrated that moving a 40-ton Sarsen stone across the Chalk Downs would have required a workforce of at least 500 people, along with massive timber sledges, rope systems, and carefully prepared roadways. The construction of the transportation infrastructure alone represented a major engineering undertaking. The route from the Marlborough Downs to Stonehenge crossed numerous valleys, streams, and ridges that required extensive preparation before the massive stones could pass. Archaeological survey has identified possible remnants of this prehistoric roadway, including sections where the natural chalk surface was artificially levelled, and areas where timber causeways may have been constructed across wet ground. The roadway construction would have required hundreds of workers labouring for months to create a route capable of supporting the enormous weight of the Sarsen stones and their transport sledges. The timber sledges used for Sarsen transport represented masterpieces of Neolithic engineering, constructed from massive oak timbers joined with sophisticated carpentry techniques. These sledges needed to distribute the enormous weight of the Sarsen stones across a wide area to prevent them from sinking into the chalk surface, while remaining manoeuvrable enough to navigate the undulating terrain of the Downs. Experimental reconstructions suggest that the sledges measured at least 15 metres in length and 4 metres in width, constructed from oak timbers up to 60 centimetres in diameter. The sledge construction alone would have required the felling of hundreds of mature oak trees and the labour of skilled carpenters working for several months. The rope systems used to pull the loaded sledges across the landscape represented another technological marvel of the Sarsen transport project. Moving a 50-ton load required rope systems capable of generating enormous pulling forces while distributing the load among hundreds of workers. The ropes themselves, likely made from twisted plant fibres or leather strips, needed to be both incredibly strong and flexible enough to allow coordinated pulling by large teams. Archaeological experiments suggest that moving the largest Sarsen stones would have required rope systems totalling several miles in length, representing a substantial investment in materials and manufacturing time. The social organisation required for the Sarsen transport project reveals the sophisticated political and economic structures that had developed in southern Britain by 2500 BC. The mobilization of 500 or more workers for extended periods required not only effective leadership, but also complex systems for feeding, housing, and coordinating such large groups. Archaeological evidence from contemporary sites suggests that the Beaker culture had developed hierarchical social structures with powerful chiefs capable of commanding the labour and resources of multiple communities across wide geographical areas. The feeding requirements alone for a Sarsen transport expedition would have strained the resources of entire regions. A workforce of 500 people engaged in the physically demanding work of stone transport would have consumed approximately 1,500 kilograms of food daily, requiring careful planning and coordination among numerous farming communities. Archaeological deposits from this period show evidence of large-scale food preparation and storage, including massive pottery vessels capable of holding hundreds of litres of liquid and cooking hearths designed to prepare meals for large groups. The arrival of each Sarsen stone at Stonehenge marked a significant achievement worthy of celebration and ceremony. Archaeological evidence suggests that the completion of each transport expedition was marked by feasting and ritual activities that brought together participants from across the region. These celebrations served not only to mark the successful completion of dangerous and difficult work, but also to reinforce the social bonds and political relationships that made such large-scale projects possible. Once the Sarsen stones reached Stonehenge, the builders faced the equally challenging task of shaping them into the precise forms required for the monument's architectural design. The shaping process relied primarily on Sarsen hammers, smaller blocks of the same sandstone material used to pound and chip away unwanted portions of the larger stones. This technique, known as pecking, required enormous patience and skill to achieve the precise dimensions and smooth surfaces visible on the finished trilithons. Archaeological analysis of the shaped Sarsens reveals tool marks and surface textures that provide detailed insights into the stoneworking techniques employed by Neolithic craftsmen. The precision achieved in Sarsen stone shaping demonstrates the presence of highly skilled specialists who had developed sophisticated techniques for working with this extremely hard material. The upright stones of the trilithons were carefully tapered, with their upper portions narrowed to create an elegant visual proportion while maintaining structural integrity. The horizontal lintels were shaped with precise curves that followed the circular plan of the monument, requiring mathematical calculations and careful measurement to ensure proper fit. The surfaces of the most prominent stones were smoothed to a near-polished finish, using progressively finer Sarsen hammers and abrasive materials. The most remarkable aspect of the Sarsen stone preparation was the creation of sophisticated joinery systems that ensured the structural stability of the trilithons. The builders employed mortise and tenon joints, with projecting tenons carved on the tops of the upright stones that fit into corresponding mortises cut into the undersides of the horizontal lintels. These joints, familiar from contemporary woodworking traditions, required extraordinary precision when executed in stone, with tolerances measured in millimetres to ensure proper fit and load distribution. The creation of mortise and tenon joints in Sarsen stone represented one of the most technically demanding aspects of the entire construction project. The tenons, typically measuring approximately 30 centimetres in length and 15 centimetres in width, had to be carved with perfect symmetry and precise dimensions to ensure proper fit with their corresponding mortises. The mortises themselves required even greater precision, as any error in their dimensions or positioning would prevent proper assembly of the trilithons. The accuracy achieved in these joints demonstrates the presence of master craftsmen who had developed specialized techniques for measuring and shaping stone with extraordinary precision. Additional joinery techniques employed in the Sarsen construction included tongue and groove joints between adjacent lintel stones, ensuring that the horizontal elements of the monument formed a continuous ring around the circle's perimeter. These joints prevented lateral movement of the lintels, while allowing for slight settling and thermal expansion without compromising structural integrity. The complexity of these joinery systems reveals that the Stonehenge builders had adapted sophisticated woodworking techniques for use in stone construction, creating hybrid technologies that combine the best aspects of both materials. The erection of the trilithons themselves represented the culmination of the entire Sarsen construction project, requiring engineering techniques that pushed Neolithic technology to its absolute limits. The process began with the excavation of precisely shaped holes for the upright stones, with each hole carefully calculated to provide adequate support while maintaining proper alignment. The holes for the largest trilithon uprights extended more than 2 meters below ground level, with carefully sloped sides that allowed the massive stones to be slid into position using controlled techniques. Archaeological investigation of the trilithon stone holes has revealed evidence of the sophisticated techniques used to erect the upright stones. Many holes show signs of ramping on one side, where the ground level was gradually raised to create an inclined plane that allowed the stones to be walked upright using rope and lever systems. The opposite sides of the holes were often undercut to provide clearance for the stones as they were raised to vertical positions. Once the uprights were properly positioned, the holes were backfilled with carefully selected chalk rubble and smaller stones that provided secure anchoring for the massive monoliths. The installation of the horizontal lintels presented even greater engineering challenges, as these massive stones needed to be lifted more than 4 meters above ground level and positioned with millimeter precision to engage their mortise and tenon joints. The most widely accepted theory for lintel installation involves the construction of massive timber frameworks that provided both lifting mechanisms and working platforms for the stoneworkers. These timber structures would have required enormous quantities of wood and sophisticated carpentry techniques to create frameworks capable of supporting stones weighing up to 10 tons at considerable heights above the ground. Alternative theories for lintel installation include the use of earth ramps built up around the upright stones to provide access for positioning the horizontal elements. This technique would have required the movement of thousands of tons of earth and chalk, creating temporary ramps that were later removed to reveal the completed trilithons. Archaeological evidence for such ramps remains elusive, but the absence of evidence may simply reflect the thorough cleanup that followed the construction project. The completed trilithons created an architectural ensemble of unprecedented monumentality in prehistoric Europe. The 5 great trilithons, arranged in a horseshoe pattern within the Sarsen circle, rose to heights exceeding 7 meters above ground level, creating an imposing presence that dominated the surrounding landscape for miles in every direction. The careful graduation of heights, with the central trilithon standing tallest and the outer trilithons progressively shorter, created a sophisticated architectural composition that demonstrated advanced understanding of visual proportion and spatial relationships. The astronomical alignments incorporated into the trilithon arrangement reveal the continued importance of celestial observation in the monument's design and function. The central trilithon was precisely aligned with the winter solstice sunset, creating a dramatic visual effect as the sun appeared to set directly between the massive uprights when viewed from the monument's centre. This alignment complemented the existing summer solstice sunrise alignment established during the monument's earlier phases, creating a solar axis that divided the monument into distinct ceremonial zones associated with the annual cycle of seasons. The Hailstone, a massive Sarsen monolith positioned outside the main monument circle, served as a crucial element in the astronomical alignment system. When viewed from the centre of the stone circle on the morning of the summer solstice, the sun appeared to rise directly over the Hailstone, creating a spectacular visual display that marked the year's longest day. The precision of this alignment, maintained despite the enormous technical challenges of positioning such massive stones, demonstrates that astronomical considerations were paramount in the monument's design and construction. The social implications of the completed trilithon construction extended far beyond the immediate monument site to influence the development of complex societies across Bronze Age Britain. The successful completion of such an enormous project demonstrated the organisational capabilities and technical expertise of the communities responsible for its construction, establishing them as leaders in the emerging Bronze Age social hierarchy. The monument served as a powerful symbol of political authority and religious significance that attracted visitors and pilgrims from across Europe, contributing to the development of extensive trade networks and cultural exchange systems. The specialised craftsmen responsible for the trilithon construction represented a new class of technical experts whose skills were essential for the increasingly complex construction projects of the Bronze Age period. These master builders possessed knowledge of stoneworking, engineering, astronomy and project management that made them valuable resources for communities across Britain and continental Europe. Archaeological evidence suggests that some of these specialists travelled widely, carrying their expertise to other monument construction projects and contributing to the spread of advanced building techniques across prehistoric Europe. The coordinated labour required for trilithon construction also contributed to the development of more sophisticated social and political institutions in Bronze Age Britain. The successful completion of the project required unprecedented levels of cooperation among multiple communities, creating political relationships and social bonds that persisted long after the construction was completed. These relationships facilitated trade, cultural exchange, and mutual defence arrangements that contributed to the stability and prosperity of the region during the subsequent centuries. The completion of the Great Trilithons marked not merely an architectural achievement, but the culmination of a complex social transformation that had been developing across the Salisbury Plain for over a millennium. Archaeological evidence reveals that Stonehenge served as both a magnet for diverse populations and a crucible where different cultural traditions merged, creating new forms of religious practice, social organisation, and technological innovation. The monument's builders and users represented a remarkably heterogeneous population, whose origins stretched across Britain and continental Europe, united by shared beliefs about the power of this sacred landscape. Recent isotope analysis of cremated remains found at Stonehenge has revolutionised our understanding of who built and used the monument. Strontium isotope signatures, which reflect the geological environment where individuals spent their childhood years, reveal that many of those buried at Stonehenge originated from regions far beyond the Salisbury Plain. Analysis conducted by researchers at the University of Oxford examined cremated bone fragments from 25 individuals buried at the site between 3000 and 2500 BC, discovering that at least 15 of these people had grown up in regions with distinctive geological signatures that do not match the local chalk geology. The isotopic evidence points to origins in Western Britain, particularly Wales and the Cornish Peninsula, regions that share geological characteristics with the sources of the Stonehenge bluestones. This discovery provides compelling support for theories that the bluestone transport involved not merely the movement of stones, but the migration of entire communities from Wales to Salisbury Plain. These migrants brought with them not only their ancestral stones, but also their burial traditions, craft techniques, and religious practices that would profoundly influence Stonehenge's development during its most intensive construction phases. Additional isotope studies have identified individuals whose childhood signatures suggest origins in continental Europe, particularly regions of modern-day Germany and the Netherlands. These continental connections reflect the extensive trade and cultural exchange networks that characterised late Neolithic and early Bronze Age Europe. The presence of foreign-born individuals in Stonehenge's burial population demonstrates that the monument's reputation extended far beyond Britain, attracting pilgrims, craftsmen and religious practitioners from across the known world of prehistoric Europe. The cremation practices documented at Stonehenge reveal sophisticated mortuary traditions that evolve continuously over more than 1,500 years of use. The earliest cremations, dating to around 3000 BC, were relatively simple affairs involving the burning of bodies on pyres constructed near the monument, with the resulting bone fragments collected and deposited in the Aubrey holes. These early cremations show evidence of careful bone selection, with specific anatomical elements chosen for burial, while others were presumably scattered or disposed of elsewhere, suggesting complex beliefs about which portions of the body required formal interment. By 2500 BC, cremation practices at Stonehenge had become considerably more elaborate, incorporating grave goods, structured burial deposits, and evidence of extended mortuary rituals that may have lasted several days. Cremations from this period often include miniature pottery vessels, bone pins, amber beads, and flint tools that accompanied the deceased into the afterlife. The quality and exotic origins of these grave goods indicate that access to burial within Stonehenge was increasingly restricted to individuals of high social status or specialised religious roles. The most remarkable cremation deposits from Stonehenge date to the period of Trilithon construction, when burial practices reached unprecedented levels of complexity and elaboration. These burials often involved multiple individuals whose cremated remains were mixed together in single deposits, creating communal burials that may have commemorated specific events or ceremonial occasions. Analysis of these mixed deposits has revealed that they often include individuals of different ages and both sexes, suggesting that communal burial was based on factors other than kinship or gender. One particularly significant cremation deposit discovered near the central Trilithon contained the remains of at least 4 individuals, along with an exceptional collection of grave goods, including a polished stone mace head, gold hair ornaments, and pottery vessels decorated with intricate geometric patterns. The mace head, carved from a distinctive green stone that originated in the Lake District of northern England, represents one of the finest examples of Neolithic stone carving found in Britain. The gold ornaments among the earliest gold artefacts found at Stonehenge demonstrate connections to the emerging metallurgical traditions of Bronze Age Europe. The Beaker culture, which dominated Stonehenge's later construction phases, introduced revolutionary changes in both burial practices and material culture that reflected broader transformations occurring across Bronze Age Europe. Named after their distinctive bell-shaped pottery vessels, the Beaker people represented a cultural phenomenon that spread across Europe between 2800 and 1800 BC, bringing with them new technologies, social structures, and religious practices that would fundamentally alter prehistoric European society. Beaker pottery found at Stonehenge demonstrates the technical sophistication and aesthetic refinement that characterized this cultural tradition. These vessels, typically measuring between 15 and 25 centimetres in height, were shaped with remarkable symmetry and decorated with intricate geometric patterns created using finely toothed combs, twisted cords, or carved stamps pressed into the clay before firing. The decorative motif shows strong consistency across vast geographical areas, from the Iberian Peninsula to the British Isles, indicating the existence of shared symbolic systems and possibly standardized training methods for pottery production. The technical quality of Beaker pottery represents a significant advancement over earlier Neolithic ceramic traditions. The clay was more carefully prepared, with organic temper materials added to improve firing characteristics and reduce shrinkage during the drying process. Firing temperatures were higher and more carefully controlled, producing vessels with greater durability and water resistance. The standardization of vessel forms and decorative motifs suggests the emergence of specialized pottery workshops where skilled craftsmen produced vessels for both local use and long-distance trade. Beaker metalworking traditions introduced Bronze Age Britain to sophisticated techniques for producing copper and bronze artifacts that would transform both technology and social organization. The earliest metal objects found at Stonehenge include copper daggers, gold hair ornaments, and bronze awls that demonstrate mastery of complex metallurgical processes. These artefacts required not only technical knowledge of metal extraction and working, but also access to raw materials that originated in distant regions, indicating the existence of extensive trade networks that connected Britain to metal-producing regions across Europe. The copper used in early beaker metalwork at Stonehenge originated primarily from mines in Wales, Ireland, and continental Europe, with chemical analysis revealing that different artefacts were made from metal sources hundreds of miles apart. This pattern of diverse metal sources suggests that beaker metal workers were not simply local craftsmen working with regional materials, but specialists who participated in continent-wide networks of material exchange and technical knowledge sharing. The presence of such sophisticated metalwork at Stonehenge indicates that the monument attracted the finest craftsmen of the age, who contributed their skills to its construction and ceremonial activities. The social implications of beaker metalworking extend far beyond mere technological innovation to reveal fundamental changes in Bronze Age social organisation. Metal objects, particularly weapons and ornaments, served as powerful symbols of social status and political authority that could not be easily replicated by individuals lacking access to specialised knowledge and raw materials. The concentration of high-quality metalwork at Stonehenge suggests that the monument served as a centre of political power where elite individuals gathered to display their wealth and reinforce their social positions through participation in elaborate ceremonies. Archaeological evidence from Stonehenge burials dating to the Beaker period reveals dramatic changes in social stratification and wealth distribution compared to earlier Neolithic practices. While Neolithic burials at the site were relatively egalitarian, with grave goods consisting primarily of pottery vessels and flint tools available to most community members, Beaker burials show clear evidence of social hierarchy. Elite burials contain exotic materials, finely crafted artifacts, and evidence of specialised mortuary treatments that were clearly unavailable to the general population. The most spectacular Beaker burial discovered near Stonehenge is the grave of the so-called Amesbury Archer, found just 3 miles from the monument in 2002. This individual, who died around 2300 BC, was buried with an unprecedented collection of grave goods, including 16 barbed and tanged flint arrowheads, copper daggers, gold hair ornaments, stone wrist guards, and pottery vessels from multiple cultural traditions. Isotope analysis revealed that the Amesbury Archer had grown up in the alpine regions of Central Europe before migrating to Britain, where he apparently achieved high status within the communities responsible for Stonehenge's later construction phases. The Amesbury Archer's burial demonstrates the international character of the elite networks that developed around Stonehenge during the Beaker period. His grave goods include artefacts that originated across Europe, from flint tools made from French materials to metalwork that shows connections to Central European technological traditions. The archer's physical remains show evidence of a knee injury that would have caused permanent disability, yet his high-status burial indicates that physical impairment did not prevent him from achieving prominent social position within Beaker society. The pattern of disability and injury among individuals buried at Stonehenge has attracted considerable archaeological attention, with researchers identifying an unusually high proportion of burials showing evidence of physical trauma, congenital disorders, and chronic health conditions. Statistical analysis of the Stonehenge burial population reveals that approximately 40% of individuals show evidence of significant physical impairments, a rate substantially higher than that found at contemporary sites elsewhere in Britain. This pattern suggests that Stonehenge may have served as a place of healing, where individuals with physical ailments came seeking relief or cure. Evidence for Stonehenge's reputation as a healing centre comes from multiple sources, including the unusual concentration of individuals with specific types of injuries and the presence of materials associated with medical practices in prehistoric Europe. Many of the burials show evidence of healed fractures, suggesting that injured individuals survived their trauma and lived for extended periods after their accidents. The presence of individuals with congenital conditions such as spina bifida and dwarfism indicates that the monument attracted people whose conditions would have been immediately apparent and may have been interpreted as signs of special spiritual significance. The healing traditions associated with Stonehenge may have been connected to beliefs about the special properties of the blue stones, which continue to play important roles in the monument's ritual activities even after the construction of the massive Sarsen trilithons. Medieval Welsh texts describe similar stones from the Preseli Hills as having magical healing properties, and archaeological evidence suggests that fragments of the Stonehenge bluestones were deliberately chipped away, possibly for use in healing rituals or as protective amulets. The wear patterns visible on several of the bluestones indicate that they were repeatedly touched or rubbed by visitors, suggesting that physical contact with the stones was an important component of healing ceremonies. The international reputation of Stonehenge as a healing centre is further supported by isotope analysis of individuals buried at nearby sites, which reveals that people from across Britain and continental Europe travelled to the Salisbury Plain region during the monument's period of peak activity. The Boscombe Bowmen, a group burial discovered near Stonehenge containing 7 individuals who died around 2300 BC, includes people whose isotope signatures indicate origins in Wales, suggesting that entire families or communities made pilgrimages to the monument seeking healing or participating in important ceremonies. The mortuary practices documented at Stonehenge during the Beaker period reveal increasingly complex beliefs about death, afterlife, and the relationship between the living and the dead. Unlike the communal cremation practices of earlier periods, Beaker burials were typically individual interments that emphasized personal identity and social status through elaborate grave-good assemblages. These burials were often accompanied by specific positioning of the body and orientation toward astronomically significant directions, indicating that celestial alignments remained important components of mortuary ritual, even as burial practices evolved. The transition from cremation to inhumation burial during the Beaker period represents a fundamental shift in religious beliefs and social practices that had profound implications for monument use and development. Inhumation burials required different types of mortuary facilities and ceremonial spaces compared to cremation practices, leading to modifications in the monument's layout and the construction of new ritual features. The addition of the avenue, a ceremonial roadway leading from the River Avon to Stonehenge, may have been connected to these changing mortuary practices, providing a formal route for funeral processions carrying the dead to their final resting places. The diversity of burial practices documented at Stonehenge during its 500-year period of active use reflects the monument's role as a meeting place where different cultural traditions encountered and influenced each other. Early Neolithic cremations, Beaker inhumations, and various hybrid practices created a complex mortuary landscape that accommodated the diverse beliefs and practices of the monument's multicultural user community. This flexibility and adaptability help explain Stonehenge's remarkable longevity as an active religious centre, as successive generations were able to modify existing practices to meet their evolving spiritual needs while maintaining continuity with ancestral traditions. The archaeological evidence from Stonehenge's burials provides unprecedented insights into the lives, beliefs, and social relationships of the people who built and used one of humanity's most remarkable monuments. From the Welsh migrants who transported the bluestones to the continental craftsmen who introduced revolutionary new technologies, from the local farmers who provided the labour for massive construction projects, to the disabled pilgrims who sought healing within the sacred circle, the burial population of Stonehenge represents a cross-section of Bronze Age European society united by shared participation in one of prehistory's most ambitious religious and architectural undertakings. The Great Trilithons stood complete by 1600 BC, their massive Sarsen stones testament to the organisational power and technical mastery of the Beaker culture. Yet even as these monuments reached their final architectural form, the forces that had created them were already beginning to transform. The early Bronze Age brought fundamental changes to British society that would gradually alter both the use and significance of Stonehenge, initiating a long process of modification and eventual abandonment that would span the next 1,000 years. The most significant architectural changes during the early Bronze Age involved the rearrangement of the bluestones that had been brought from Wales nearly a millennium earlier. Around 1600 BC, the builders undertook a comprehensive reorganisation of these sacred stones, dismantling the existing bluestone arrangements and creating new configurations that better integrated with the completed Sarsen structure. This rearrangement was not merely aesthetic, but reflected changing ritual requirements and evolving religious practices that demanded different spatial relationships between the monument's various elements. Archaeological investigation of the bluestone rearrangement has revealed the complexity of this undertaking. The builders carefully removed each bluestone from its existing position, transported it to a new location within the monument, and re-erected it according to a predetermined plan that demonstrates sophisticated architectural planning. Stone holes from this period show evidence of multiple reuses, with some positions receiving several different stones in succession, as the builders experimented with various arrangements before settling on their final configuration. The new bluestone arrangement created a more integrated architectural composition that emphasised the relationship between the Welsh stones and the Sarsen trilithons. The bluestones were repositioned to form an inner horseshoe that echoed the shape of the trilithon arrangement, while maintaining their distinct identity as sacred stones from the ancestral landscape of Wales. This configuration allowed ritual participants to move between the bluestone and Sarsen elements of the monument, while experiencing both as components of a unified architectural whole. Several bluestones received special treatment during this rearrangement, being carefully shaped and positioned to serve specific ceremonial functions. The altar stone, a massive block of Devonian sandstone that may have originated from the Brecon Beacons region of Wales, was repositioned at the centre of the monument where it could serve as a focal point for ceremonies conducted within the Trilithon horseshoe. Despite its name, there is no evidence that this stone was used for sacrificial purposes. Instead, it appears to have served as a ceremonial platform or marker for important ritual activities. The technical challenges of moving and repositioning stones weighing several tons within the confined space of the completed monument required sophisticated engineering techniques and careful planning. The builders needed to avoid damaging the existing Sarsen structures while manoeuvring the bluestones through the narrow gaps between the trilithons. Archaeological evidence suggests that they used timber rollers, rope systems, and possibly earth ramps to accomplish this delicate work, demonstrating that the specialised knowledge required for monument construction had been preserved and transmitted across generations. While the builders were modifying the monument's stone arrangements, broader cultural changes were transforming Bronze Age society across Britain. The communal monument building traditions that had characterised the Neolithic period gradually gave way to more individualistic practices that emphasised personal wealth, status, and achievement over collective ritual activities. This transformation is most clearly visible in burial practices, where the large communal cemeteries of the Neolithic period were replaced by individual barrow burials that celebrated the achievements of specific individuals rather than community solidarity. The round barrows that began appearing across the Salisbury Plain during the early Bronze Age represent a fundamental shift in how Bronze Age communities understood death, memory, and social organisation. These individual burial mounds, typically measuring between 15 and 30 metres in diameter, were constructed to commemorate specific individuals whose social status or achievements warranted permanent memorial. The barrows were positioned to be visible from considerable distances, serving as lasting monuments to the deceased, while asserting territorial claims and family prestige across the landscape. Archaeological investigation of Bronze Age round barrows near Stonehenge has revealed burial practices of extraordinary richness and complexity. The Normanton Down Barrow Cemetery, located just over a mile south of Stonehenge, contains more than 40 individual burial mounds dating to the early and middle Bronze Age periods. Excavations of these barrows have uncovered some of the richest grave good assemblages known from prehistoric Britain, including gold ornaments, bronze weapons, exotic pottery, and materials that originated from across Europe and beyond. The Bush Barrow burial, excavated in 1808, exemplifies the wealth and international connections of the Bronze Age elite, who continued to use the Stonehenge landscape for their most important ceremonies. This burial contained a male individual, accompanied by an extraordinary collection of grave goods, including 3 bronze daggers, a stone mace head, gold belt hook, gold lozenge-shaped ornament, and wooden objects decorated with gold studs. The bronze daggers show influences from multiple European metalworking traditions, while the goldwork demonstrates technical sophistication that rivals contemporary examples from the most advanced centres of Bronze Age Europe. Chemical analysis of the Bush Barrow gold has revealed that the metal originated from sources in Ireland and possibly Brittany, demonstrating that the Stonehenge region remained connected to extensive trade networks that spanned the Atlantic facade of Europe. The technical quality of the goldwork, particularly the intricate geometric patterns created using microscopic gold wire, indicates the presence of master craftsmen whose skills were comparable to those working for royal courts in contemporary civilizations of the Mediterranean and Near East. The concentration of wealthy barrow burials around Stonehenge suggests that the monument continued to attract elite individuals who sought association with its sacred power and ancient prestige. However, the shift from communal burial within the monument itself to individual barrow burial in the surrounding landscape reflects fundamental changes in social organisation and religious belief. The monument was no longer primarily a cemetery where community members sought eternal rest among their ancestors, but rather a ceremonial centre where elite individuals conducted rituals that reinforced their social status and political authority. Despite these changes in burial practices, archaeological evidence indicates that ritual activity at Stonehenge itself continued throughout the early Bronze Age, though with different characteristics and purposes than in earlier periods. Excavations have uncovered numerous votive deposits dating to this period, including carefully placed collections of pottery vessels, bronze implements, and exotic materials that were deliberately buried or deposited within the monument as offerings to supernatural powers or ancestral spirits. The votive deposits from the Bronze Age period show distinct patterns that reflect evolving ritual practices and changing relationships between human communities and the sacred landscape. Many deposits contain miniature versions of everyday objects, tiny pottery vessels, small bronze tools, and model weapons that may have served as symbolic substitutes for full-sized offerings. This practice of miniaturization suggests that ritual economy was becoming more efficient, allowing communities to maintain their ceremonial obligations while conserving valuable materials for other purposes. Bronze Age pottery found in ritual contexts at Stonehenge demonstrates continued innovation in ceramic technology and decorative traditions. Food vessels, characterized by their distinctive overhanging rims and elaborate geometric decoration, appear frequently in votive deposits and suggest that communal feasting remained an important component of ceremonies conducted at the monument. Collared urns, large vessels used for cremation burial and food storage, show influences from multiple regional traditions, indicating that Stonehenge continued to attract participants from across Britain and continental Europe. The metalwork deposited as votive offerings during the Bronze Age period reveals the continued importance of Stonehenge as a centre for displaying and consecrating valuable objects. Bronze axes, daggers and ornaments were deliberately damaged or killed before deposition, rendering them unsuitable for practical use while transforming them into appropriate offerings for supernatural recipients. This practice of ritual destruction reflects beliefs about the proper relationship between human and divine realms, with valuable objects requiring transformation before they could cross the boundary between the world of the living and the realm of the ancestors or gods. Evidence for continued astronomical observation and calendar keeping at Stonehenge during the Bronze Age comes from the careful positioning of votive deposits in relation to significant sightlines and celestial alignments. Many ritual deposits were placed at locations where they would be illuminated by the rising or setting sun on important dates in the agricultural and ceremonial calendar. This practice suggests that the monument's astronomical functions remained important even as its primary use shifted from communal burial ground to elite ceremonial centre. The construction of the avenue, a ceremonial roadway connecting Stonehenge to the River Avon, probably dates to the early Bronze Age period and reflects the changing nature of ritual activities at the monument. The avenue consists of parallel banks and ditches that extend for nearly 2 miles from the monument's entrance to the river, creating a formal processional route that could accommodate large groups moving between the river and the stone circle. The avenue's alignment incorporates the summer solstice sunrise direction, ensuring that processions moving along its length would be oriented toward this astronomically significant direction. Archaeological investigation of the avenue has revealed evidence for elaborate processions that may have involved hundreds of participants carrying ritual objects, food offerings, and ceremonial paraphernalia between the river and the monument. Deposits of pottery vessels, bronze objects, and animal bones along the avenue's length suggest that these processions included stops for feasting, ritual activities, and ceremonial displays that transform the journey to Stonehenge into an extended religious experience. The avenue's construction required substantial labour investment and careful planning, indicating that processional activities had become increasingly important components of Bronze Age ceremonial practice. The River Avon itself appears to have played significant roles in Bronze Age rituals associated with Stonehenge. Archaeological investigation of the river channel near the avenue's terminus has recovered numerous bronze objects, including weapons, tools and ornaments that were deliberately deposited in the water as votive offerings. This practice of river deposition was widespread across Bronze Age Europe and reflects beliefs about water as a medium for communication with supernatural powers and a boundary between the human world and the realm of the dead. The types of objects deposited in the River Avon reveal changing patterns of ritual practice and social organisation during the Bronze Age period. Early deposits consist primarily of individual items, single axes, daggers, or ornaments that may have been offered by individual participants seeking divine favour or supernatural assistance. Later, deposits include larger assemblages of objects that suggest communal ceremonies involving multiple participants who contributed offerings according to their social status and economic capabilities. As the Bronze Age progressed, evidence for large-scale construction activities at Stonehenge diminishes significantly, reflecting broader changes in how communities allocated their resources and organised their collective activities. The massive labour mobilisation that had characterised earlier construction phases was no longer feasible or necessary as social organisation shifted towards more hierarchical structures that concentrated wealth and authority in the hands of elite individuals rather than community leaders who derived their power from their ability to organise collective projects. The decline in monument construction did not indicate abandonment of the site, but rather transformation in its primary functions and user communities. Archaeological evidence suggests that Stonehenge became increasingly associated with elite activities, high-status burials, diplomatic meetings, and ceremonial displays of wealth and power, while losing its earlier role as a community gathering place where regional populations came together for collective ritual activities and monument construction projects. Regional political changes during the Middle Bronze Age further contributed to Stonehenge's transformation from active construction site to established ceremonial centre. The emergence of hill forts and defended settlements across southern Britain indicates increasing territorial competition and warfare that made large-scale cooperative projects more difficult to organise and complete. Communities that had previously contributed labour and resources to monument construction were increasingly focused on defensive preparations and territorial consolidation that left little surplus capacity for ambitious building projects. The development of new religious centres during the Bronze Age provided alternative focal points for ritual activities that had previously been concentrated at Stonehenge. Flag Fen in Cambridgeshire, Seahenge in Norfolk, and numerous other timber and stone circles constructed during this period offered communities closer alternatives to the long journey required to reach Stonehenge. These newer sites often incorporated innovations in design and function that reflected evolving religious practices and changing social needs, making them more attractive to communities seeking contemporary solutions to their ceremonial requirements. The gradual decline in ritual activity at Stonehenge was also influenced by changing beliefs about the relationship between human communities and the sacred landscape. The ancestor veneration practices that had motivated monument construction and ritual activity during the Neolithic and early Bronze Age periods were increasingly replaced by religious systems that emphasized personal relationships with deities rather than collective obligations to ancestral spirits. This transformation reduced the importance of ancient burial grounds and ancestral monuments, while increasing the significance of natural features, springs, groves, and hilltops that were perceived as dwelling places of active deities rather than repositories of ancestral power. Environmental changes during the later Bronze Age may have contributed to reduced activity at Stonehenge by altering the agricultural productivity and settlement patterns of the surrounding region. Climate deterioration around 1200 BC led to cooler, wetter conditions that made cereal cultivation more difficult and reduced the carrying capacity of pasture lands. These changes forced communities to focus their resources on subsistence activities rather than ceremonial obligations, while population decline reduced the number of people available for large-scale ritual gatherings and monument maintenance activities. Archaeological evidence from the later Bronze Age indicates that, while major construction and modification activities ceased at Stonehenge, the monument continued to attract occasional visitors who left small votive deposits and conducted private ceremonies within the stone circle. These later activities were typically small-scale affairs involving individual families or small groups, rather than the large regional gatherings that had characterized earlier periods. The persistence of these activities demonstrates that Stonehenge retained its sacred character even as its role in regional religious and political life diminished significantly. By the time Julius Caesar's legions first crossed the English Channel in 55 BC, Stonehenge had already stood silent for over a millennium. The great trilithons that had once witnessed elaborate Bronze Age ceremonies now presided over a landscape transformed by centuries of changing settlement patterns, evolving agricultural practices, and shifting religious beliefs. Yet the monument's power to inspire awe and reverence had not diminished with the passage of time. Roman soldiers, administrators, and settlers would encounter these ancient stones with a mixture of curiosity, respect, and superstition that would profoundly influence both their understanding of Britain's mysterious past and their approach to governing its native populations. The Roman conquest of Britain, completed under Emperor Claudius in 43 AD, brought systematic documentation and archaeological preservation to sites that had previously existed only in oral tradition and local memory. Roman writers, trained in the classical tradition of geographical and ethnographic description, provided the first written accounts of Britain's ancient monuments, though their interpretations were inevitably filtered through Mediterranean cultural assumptions and imperial political objectives. These early descriptions, while often inaccurate in their historical details, preserve valuable information about how Stonehenge appeared to foreign observers and what role it played in Romano-British society. Archaeological evidence from the Roman period reveals continued reverence for Stonehenge among both native Britons and Roman settlers. Excavations around the monument have uncovered substantial quantities of Roman pottery, coins and personal ornaments dating from the 1st through 4th centuries AD, indicating regular visits by people carrying the material culture of Roman civilization. The distribution patterns of these artifacts suggest that Stonehenge served as a pilgrimage destination where visitors from across Roman Britain came to participate in religious ceremonies that blended traditional Celtic practices with Roman religious innovations. Roman coins found at Stonehenge provide particularly compelling evidence for the monument's continued sacred significance during the imperial period. Numismatic analysis has identified coins from across the Roman world, including issues from Rome itself, Gallic mints, and provincial workshops scattered throughout the empire. The presence of coins from such diverse sources indicates that Stonehenge attracted visitors from far beyond Britain's borders, suggesting that knowledge of the monument's significance had spread throughout the Roman world through military service, trade connections, and religious networks. The chronological distribution of Roman coins at Stonehenge reveals patterns of visitation that correspond to broader historical developments within the empire. Peak periods of coin deposition occurred during the 1st and 2nd centuries AD, when Roman rule in Britain was most secure and economic prosperity facilitated long-distance travel for religious purposes. A secondary peak during the 4th century coincides with the revival of interest in traditional religious sites that accompanied Christianity's rise to official status, as both pagan and Christian communities sought to claim ancient sacred places for their own religious purposes. Many of the Roman coins found at Stonehenge show evidence of deliberate damage or modification that suggests their use in ritual contexts rather than ordinary commercial transactions. Coins with holes punched through their centres may have been worn as amulets or attached to clothing during ceremonial activities. Others show signs of having been deliberately bent or broken, practices associated with votive offerings in both Celtic and Roman religious traditions. The careful placement of these damaged coins in specific locations around the monument indicates that coin deposition followed established ritual protocols that governed appropriate behaviour within the sacred precinct. Roman pottery vessels found at Stonehenge demonstrate the sophisticated ceramic traditions that developed in Romano-British workshops during the 1st through 4th centuries AD. Samian ware from Gallic workshops appears alongside locally produced grey wares and specialised religious vessels that show influences from multiple cultural traditions. The presence of complete vessels in ritual contexts suggests that pottery offerings continued the Bronze Age tradition of depositing valuable objects within the monument, while the mixing of Roman and native ceramic styles reflects the cultural synthesis that characterised Romano-British society. The religious practices documented at Roman period Stonehenge reveal complex interactions between Celtic and Mediterranean spiritual traditions that created new forms of syncretistic worship. Celtic Druids, whose religious authority had been systematically suppressed by Roman administrators in Gaul and elsewhere, may have found refuge in Britain's remote sacred sites, where they could continue traditional practices while adapting to Roman political realities. Archaeological evidence suggests that Druidical ceremonies continued at Stonehenge throughout the Roman period, though modified to accommodate imperial religious policies in the presence of Roman participants. Roman religious innovations at Stonehenge included the introduction of Mediterranean deities whose worship could be integrated with existing Celtic practices without directly challenging imperial authority. Dedications to Apollo, whose solar associations aligned with Stonehenge's astronomical functions, appear in inscriptions and votive deposits from the Roman period. Similarly, the worship of Minerva, goddess of wisdom and crafts, may have appealed to visitors seeking knowledge about the monument's construction techniques and astronomical alignments. The Romano-Celtic religious synthesis documented at Stonehenge reflects broader patterns of cultural accommodation that characterised Roman imperial policy toward indigenous populations. Rather than completely suppressing native religious practices, Roman administrators often sought to incorporate local traditions within imperial religious frameworks that maintained political loyalty while respecting cultural diversity. This approach proved particularly effective in Britain, where the prestige of ancient monuments like Stonehenge could be harnessed to support Roman authority while satisfying native spiritual needs. Evidence for Christian activity at Stonehenge during the later Roman period remains limited, but suggests that early Christian communities were aware of the monument's significance and may have conducted ceremonies there as part of their efforts to claim pagan sacred sites for Christian use. A small number of artifacts with possible Christian symbolism have been recovered from late Roman contexts, though their interpretation remains debated among archaeologists. The absence of clear Christian markers may indicate that the monument's pagan associations were too strong to permit easy conversion to Christian use, or that Christian communities preferred to establish their own sacred sites rather than occupy ancient pagan temples. The collapse of Roman authority in Britain during the 5th century AD initiated a period of political fragmentation and cultural transformation that profoundly affected how Stonehenge was perceived and used by subsequent generations. The withdrawal of Roman legions in 410 AD left Britain's Romano-British population vulnerable to Saxon invasions that would fundamentally alter the island's ethnic composition, political organisation, and cultural traditions. These changes created new contexts for understanding Stonehenge that would influence medieval perceptions of the monument's origins and significance. The Saxon settlement of southern England brought Germanic cultural traditions that interpreted ancient monuments through mythological frameworks emphasizing supernatural origins and magical powers. Saxon place names in the Stonehenge area reflect these beliefs, with the monument itself acquiring the name Stonehenge from the Old English stan and henge, referring to the distinctive appearance of the trilithons, with their massive horizontal lintels suspended between upright supports. This descriptive name replaced whatever Celtic designation the monument had previously carried, marking a fundamental shift in how the site was understood and discussed. Medieval chroniclers writing during the Norman period and later Middle Ages inherited fragmentary traditions about Stonehenge that combined Saxon folklore with learned speculation about Britain's pre-Roman past. These writers faced the challenge of explaining a monument whose true origins lay far beyond the reach of written records or reliable oral tradition. Their solutions involved creating elaborate foundation myths that satisfied medieval expectations about the relationship between supernatural powers and monumental architecture, while providing explanations that seemed plausible within contemporary cultural frameworks. Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of the Kings of Britain, completed around 1138 AD, provided the most influential medieval account of Stonehenge's origins through its dramatic narrative of Merlin's magical transportation of the stones from Ireland. According to Geoffrey's Chronicle, the monument was originally constructed in Ireland by giants who possessed supernatural strength and magical knowledge. When Aurelius Ambrosius, legendary king of the Britons, sought to create a memorial for warriors killed by Saxon treachery, Merlin advised him to bring the giant's ring from Ireland to serve as an eternal monument to their sacrifice. Geoffrey's account describes Merlin's magical powers in terms that medieval readers would have found both thrilling and plausible within contemporary beliefs about supernatural intervention in human affairs. When conventional human efforts failed to move the massive stones, Merlin employed his magical arts to accomplish the transportation with supernatural ease, demonstrating the superiority of wisdom and magical knowledge over brute physical force. The wizard's success in moving the stones validated both his supernatural powers and his role as advisor to legitimate royal authority. The Merlin legend established at Stonehenge became one of the most enduring elements of Arthurian mythology, linking the monument to the broader cycle of stories about Arthur's court and the supernatural events that surrounded Britain's greatest legendary king. Medieval writers elaborated Geoffrey's basic narrative with additional details about Merlin's magical techniques, the properties of the stones themselves, and their role in subsequent Arthurian adventures. These elaborations transformed Stonehenge from a mysterious ancient ruin into an integral component of Britain's most important legendary tradition. The association between Stonehenge and Arthurian legend provided medieval audiences with a framework for understanding the monument that satisfied both their desire for dramatic narrative and their need to connect ancient ruins with familiar cultural traditions. The Merlin story explained not only how the stones had been transported and erected, but also why they possessed the distinctive appearance that set them apart from ordinary building materials. The magical origins attributed to the stones provided justification for beliefs about their supernatural properties and healing powers that would persist well into the modern period. Medieval beliefs about Stonehenge's healing properties drew upon both classical traditions about sacred sites and contemporary Christian concepts about miraculous intervention in human affairs. The stones were believed to possess the power to cure various ailments when properly approached with appropriate rituals and sincere faith. Water poured over the stones was thought to acquire medicinal properties that could heal wounds, cure diseases, and restore fertility to barren women. These beliefs attracted pilgrims from across medieval Europe who sought relief from physical and spiritual afflictions that conventional medicine could not address. Archaeological evidence for medieval activity at Stonehenge included substantial quantities of pottery, metalwork, and other artifacts that document continued visitation and ritual activity throughout the period from 1000 to 1500 AD. Medieval pottery found at the site includes vessels from local workshops, as well as imported wares that indicate the monument's continued ability to attract visitors from distant regions. The presence of pilgrim badges, religious medallions, and other devotional objects suggests that some medieval visitors approached Stonehenge with the same reverence they would have shown to established Christian pilgrimage sites. The medieval pilgrimage tradition at Stonehenge appears to have operated alongside, rather than in competition with official Christian religious practices. Many pilgrims who visited the monument also participated in conventional Christian devotions at nearby churches and religious houses, suggesting that they viewed the ancient stones as complementary rather than alternative sources of spiritual power. This synthesis of pagan and Christian elements reflects the pragmatic approach that medieval Christianity often adopted toward pre-existing sacred sites and popular religious practices. Medieval chronicles and local traditions preserved numerous stories about supernatural events that allegedly occurred at Stonehenge during the post-Roman period. These tales typically involved encounters between human visitors and supernatural beings, ghosts, fairies, demons, or angels, who either protected the monument from desecration or punished those who approached it with improper intentions. Such stories served both to explain the monument's mysterious origins and to establish behavioural codes that governed appropriate conduct within the sacred precinct. The supernatural guardians associated with Stonehenge in medieval folklore reflected contemporary beliefs about the relationship between the living and the dead, the natural and supernatural worlds, and the proper maintenance of sacred sites. Stories about ghostly warriors who defended the monument from vandalism reinforced beliefs about the continued presence of ancient spirits, while providing practical protection against stone robbing and other forms of damage. Tales of supernatural punishment for inappropriate behaviour served as informal enforcement mechanisms that helped preserve the monument without requiring constant human supervision. Medieval artistic representations of Stonehenge, though rare, provide valuable insights into how contemporary audiences visualised the monument and understood its significance within broader cultural contexts. Manuscript illuminations typically depict the stones as more regular and architecturally sophisticated than they actually appear, reflecting medieval expectations about monumental architecture and the influence of contemporary building traditions on artistic representation. These images often include figures of Merlin or other legendary characters, emphasizing the monument's association with supernatural powers and mythological narratives. The persistence of local folklore traditions around Stonehenge throughout the medieval period demonstrates the monument's continued integration within regional cultural life despite the absence of large-scale ritual activities or construction projects. Local communities maintain traditions about appropriate behaviour at the site, seasonal observances that incorporated the monument into agricultural and social calendars, and stories that connected the stones to local family histories and community memories. These traditions provided continuity between ancient and medieval periods, while adapting to changing social and religious circumstances. Medieval administrative records occasionally mention Stonehenge in contexts that reveal its legal status and economic significance within the feudal system that governed land ownership and resource exploitation. The monument and surrounding lands were held by various noble families who exercised rights over access to the site, while maintaining obligations to protect it from damage or inappropriate use. These legal arrangements reflected both the monument's continued cultural significance and its integration within medieval systems of property ownership and territorial control. The gradual decline of medieval pilgrimage activity at Stonehenge during the later Middle Ages reflected broader changes in religious practice, travel patterns, and cultural attitudes toward ancient monuments. The Protestant Reformation's rejection of pilgrimage traditions and supernatural healing practices reduced the monument's appeal to religious visitors, while Renaissance humanism introduced new approaches to understanding the past that emphasized historical investigation over mythological explanation. These changes initiated the transformation of Stonehenge from living religious site to antiquarian curiosity that would characterize its perception during the early modern period. The Protestant Reformation's rejection of pilgrimage traditions and supernatural healing practices had fundamentally altered how educated Europeans approached ancient monuments by the 17th century. Where medieval visitors to Stonehenge had sought miraculous cures or spiritual experiences, a new generation of scholars arrived armed with measuring instruments, notebooks, and systematic methods of observation that would transform understanding of Britain's prehistoric past. These antiquarians, as they came to be known, represented the earliest attempts to study ancient monuments through careful observation and documentation rather than mythological speculation or religious interpretation. John Aubrey emerged as the most significant figure in 17th century Stonehenge studies through his pioneering application of systematic observation and measurement to archaeological investigation. Born in 1626 to a prosperous Wiltshire family, Aubrey possessed both the social connections and financial resources necessary for extended antiquarian research, along with the intellectual curiosity that drove him to question traditional explanations for ancient monuments. His approach to Stonehenge reflected the broader scientific revolution that was transforming European intellectual life during the 17th century, emphasizing empirical observation over received authority and systematic documentation over anecdotal reporting. Aubrey's first systematic survey of Stonehenge, conducted in 1666, established new standards for archaeological documentation that would influence antiquarian practice for the next 2 centuries. Using techniques borrowed from contemporary surveying and engineering practices, Aubrey created the first accurate plan of the monument that showed the precise positions of all surviving stones, the locations of fallen trilithons, and the relationships between different architectural elements. His measurements, taken with chains and surveying instruments, achieved accuracies that would not be substantially improved until the advent of modern surveying techniques in the 20th century. The discovery of the Aubrey holes during his 1666 survey represented one of the most significant archaeological findings of the 17th century, though Aubrey himself did not fully understand their significance or original function. His careful documentation of these circular depressions, arranged in a precise circle within the monument's earthwork enclosure, provided the first evidence for Stonehenge's complex multi-phase construction history. Aubrey's recognition that these features were artificial rather than natural demonstrated the sophisticated observational skills that distinguish serious antiquarian research from casual monument visiting. Aubrey's written descriptions of Stonehenge combined meticulous technical documentation with broader speculations about the monument's origins and cultural significance that reflected contemporary intellectual debates about Britain's prehistoric past. His rejection of Geoffrey of Monmouth's Merlin legend in favour of more naturalistic explanations marked a crucial transition from mythological to proto-scientific approaches to archaeological interpretation. Aubrey argued that Stonehenge must have been constructed by human agency, using techniques that, while impressive, did not require supernatural intervention or magical powers. The cultural attribution that Aubrey proposed for Stonehenge reflected both the limited historical knowledge available to 17th century scholars and the contemporary political context that shaped antiquarian research. Lacking reliable information about Britain's prehistoric inhabitants, Aubrey attributed the monument's construction to the Druids, the Celtic priesthood described by classical authors like Caesar and Tacitus. This attribution satisfied contemporary expectations about the relationship between monumental architecture and organised religion, while providing a culturally acceptable explanation that avoided both pagan superstition and classical precedents that might challenge Christian historical narratives. Aubrey's Druid theory gained widespread acceptance among educated audiences because it addressed several interpretive challenges that had long puzzled observers of ancient British monuments. The Druids' reputation for astronomical knowledge, preserved in classical sources, provided plausible explanations for Stonehenge's celestial alignments and sophisticated architectural planning. Their association with sacred groves and natural temples offered frameworks for understanding why ancient Britons would have invested enormous resources in monument construction rather than practical building projects. Most importantly, the Druids' eventual suppression by Roman authorities explained why knowledge of monument construction techniques had been lost, and why later British populations seemed incapable of similar architectural achievements. The influence of Aubrey's Druid theory extended far beyond academic circles to shape popular understanding of British prehistory for the next 3 centuries. His attribution provided a romantic and culturally appealing explanation for ancient monuments that satisfied both scholarly requirements for naturalistic causation and popular desires for dramatic historical narratives. The image of white-robed druids conducting mysterious ceremonies within stone circles became one of the most enduring elements of British cultural mythology, influencing everything from antiquarian research to modern neo-pagan religious practices. William Stukely's extensive investigations of Stonehenge during the early 18th century built upon Aubrey's pioneering work while introducing new methodological approaches that further advanced the development of archaeological science. Stukely, born in 1687 in Lincolnshire, combined medical training with passionate interests in antiquarian research and religious speculation that led him to conduct the most comprehensive study of Stonehenge attempted during the pre-modern period. His fieldwork, conducted primarily between 1720 and 1724, involved multiple visits to the monument during different seasons and weather conditions that allowed him to observe details invisible to casual visitors. Stukely's methodological innovations included the systematic use of artistic documentation to supplement written descriptions and numerical measurements. His detailed drawings of Stonehenge, executed with considerable artistic skill and technical precision, provided visual records of the monument's condition during the early 18th century that remain valuable sources for modern conservation efforts. These illustrations captured details of stone weathering, structural damage, and architectural relationships that would have been difficult to convey through written descriptions alone, establishing artistic documentation as an essential component of archaeological investigation. The accuracy of Stukely's drawings has been confirmed through comparison with modern photographic records and laser scanning data that demonstrate his remarkable observational skills and artistic precision. His illustrations correctly depict the distinctive shapes of individual stones, the patterns of weathering and lichen growth on their surfaces, and the subtle variations in colour and texture that distinguish different geological materials. This level of detail required extended periods of careful observation and considerable artistic training that few contemporary antiquarians possessed. Stukely's discovery and documentation of the avenue represented one of his most significant contributions to Stonehenge studies, though his interpretation of this feature reflected the limitations of 18th century archaeological methodology. Through careful ground observation and measurement, Stukely traced the avenue's course from the monument's entrance toward the River Avon, recognising it as an artificial earthwork that formed an integral component of the monument complex. His documentation of the avenue's alignment with the summer solstice sunrise provided crucial evidence for Stonehenge's astronomical functions, though he interpreted these alignments within religious frameworks that emphasised druidical sun worship rather than practical calendar keeping. The theoretical framework that Stukely developed for interpreting Stonehenge reflected both the intellectual sophistication of early 18th century scholarship and the religious concerns that motivated much antiquarian research during this period. Stukely's conversion from medicine to Anglican priesthood in 1729 profoundly influenced his archaeological interpretations, leading him to view ancient monuments as expressions of primitive monotheistic religion that prefigured Christian revelation. This theological perspective shaped his understanding of druidical practices and monument functions in ways that emphasized moral and spiritual instruction rather than practical astronomical or ceremonial purposes. Stukely's religious interpretation of Stonehenge involved elaborate theories about druidical theology that portrayed the ancient priesthood as custodians of divine revelation, who had preserved essential religious truths through oral tradition until the advent of Christianity. According to this framework, Stonehenge served as a temple where druids conducted ceremonies that celebrated the unity of God while instructing their followers in moral principles that aligned with Christian teachings. This interpretation allowed Stukely to reconcile his admiration for ancient British achievements with contemporary Christian theology that viewed pagan religions as corrupted versions of original divine revelation. The astronomical theories that Stukely developed to explain Stonehenge's design and orientation represented significant advances in understanding the monument's relationship to celestial phenomena, though his interpretations often extended beyond what the archaeological evidence could support. His recognition that the monument's primary axis aligned with the summer solstice sunrise provided the foundation for all subsequent studies of Stonehenge's astronomical functions. However, his additional claims about lunar alignments, planetary observations, and complex calendrical calculations reflected 18th century enthusiasm for discovering sophisticated astronomical knowledge in ancient monuments rather than careful analysis of the actual archaeological evidence. Stukely's influence on subsequent Stonehenge studies extended far beyond his specific discoveries and interpretations to establish methodological standards that would guide antiquarian research throughout the 18th and 19th centuries. His combination of systematic fieldwork, accurate documentation, and theoretical interpretation provided a model for archaeological investigation that balanced empirical observation with scholarly speculation. Later antiquarians would adopt his techniques, while modifying his interpretations according to new discoveries and evolving theoretical frameworks. The broader cultural impact of Stukely's work included the popularisation of archaeological tourism that transformed Stonehenge from a remote antiquarian curiosity into one of Britain's most celebrated ancient monuments. His published descriptions and illustrations made the monument accessible to educated audiences who lack the time or resources for extended fieldwork, while his romantic portrayal of druidical ceremonies captured popular imagination in ways that encouraged pilgrimages to the site. The increase in visitors that followed publication of Stukely's work created both opportunities for public education about Britain's prehistoric past and conservation challenges that would persist into the modern period. The development of archaeological methodology during the 18th century reflected broader intellectual changes that emphasised systematic observation, comparative analysis, and theoretical speculation based on empirical evidence rather than traditional authority or religious revelation. Antiquarians working at Stonehenge and other ancient sites developed techniques for site documentation, artefact analysis, and historical interpretation that would provide the foundation for modern archaeological science. These methodological innovations occurred within intellectual contexts that valued scientific inquiry while maintaining respect for religious and cultural traditions that shaped how ancient monuments were understood and interpreted. Early excavation attempts at Stonehenge during the 18th and 19th centuries represented pioneering efforts to recover information about the monument's construction and use through systematic investigation of buried deposits and structural features. These excavations, though limited in scope and often poorly documented by modern standards, provided the first direct evidence for the monument's complex construction history and multi-phase development. The artefacts recovered during these early investigations offered tantalising glimpses of the material culture associated with Stonehenge's builders and users, though their interpretation remained constrained by the limited comparative data available to pre-modern archaeologists. The excavation techniques employed by 18th century antiquarians reflected both the practical limitations of pre-industrial technology and the theoretical frameworks that guided their investigations. Most excavations involved relatively small-scale trenching designed to expose specific features or recover particular types of artefacts rather than comprehensive site investigation. The tools available for excavation work included primarily hand implements, spades, picks, and brushes that required enormous labour investments to achieve significant results. Documentation methods relied on written descriptions and occasional sketches rather than the systematic recording systems that would characterise later archaeological practice. The artefacts recovered from early Stonehenge excavations included pottery fragments, flint tools, bronze implements, and human remains that provided direct evidence for the monument's use during prehistoric periods. These discoveries confirmed antiquarian theories about the site's great antiquity, while raising new questions about the cultural identity of its builders and the specific purposes for which it had been constructed. The pottery assemblages in particular demonstrated connections to broader regional traditions, while exhibiting distinctive characteristics that reflected the specialised functions of ceremonial sites. The human remains discovered during early excavations at Stonehenge provided compelling evidence for the monument's mortuary functions, while raising complex questions about burial practices and social organisation among its prehistoric users. The cremated bone fragments found in various locations around the site demonstrated that burial had been an important component of the monument's ceremonial activities, though these specific rituals involved and their cultural significance remained largely mysterious to 18th and 19th century investigators. The presence of both cremated and unburned human remains suggested complex mortuary traditions that had evolved over extended periods of use. The theoretical frameworks that guided interpretation of archaeological discoveries at Stonehenge during the 18th and 19th centuries reflected contemporary assumptions about cultural evolution, racial characteristics, and the relationship between technological capability and social organisation. These interpretive approaches, while often problematic from modern perspectives, represented serious attempts to understand prehistoric societies using the intellectual tools available to pre-modern scholarship. The theories developed during this period would profoundly influence subsequent archaeological research, while establishing interpretive traditions that would persist well into the 20th century. The attribution of Stonehenge to various ancient peoples reflected both the limited historical knowledge available to early archaeologists and the cultural biases that shaped their interpretations of prehistoric achievements. The Druid theory, originally proposed by Aubrey and elaborated by Stukely, remained popular throughout the 18th century because it provided culturally acceptable explanations for the monument's sophisticated design and construction. However, alternative theories attributing Stonehenge to Romans, Phoenicians, or other historically documented peoples gained support among scholars who found Druidical explanations insufficient to account for the monument's architectural sophistication. The Roman attribution theory gained particular support during the late 18th and early 19th centuries as archaeological investigations revealed extensive evidence for Roman activity in the Stonehenge area. The discovery of Roman roads, settlements, and artifact deposits near the monument suggested that Roman engineers might have been responsible for its construction or significant modification. This theory appealed to scholars who admired Roman architectural achievements while questioning whether prehistoric British populations possessed the organisational capabilities and technical knowledge required for such ambitious construction projects. The debate over Stonehenge's cultural attribution reflected broader intellectual tensions about the relationship between technological progress and cultural development that characterised 18th and 19th century thought. Scholars who attributed the monument to Romans or other Mediterranean peoples often assumed that sophisticated architecture required advanced civilization that prehistoric Northern Europeans could not have achieved. Conversely, those who defended indigenous British origins for Stonehenge argued that ancient Celtic populations possessed capabilities that had been underestimated by classical authors and modern scholars alike. These attribution debates established patterns of archaeological argumentation that would influence the development of prehistoric archaeology throughout the 19th and 20th centuries. The emphasis on architectural sophistication as evidence for cultural advancement would shape how archaeologists interpreted monumental sites across Europe and beyond. The assumption that technological capability reflected broader social and intellectual development would influence theories about cultural evolution and historical progress that dominated archaeological thought for generations. The emergence of scientific approaches to prehistory during the late 18th and early 19th centuries represented a fundamental transformation in how scholars understood human history and cultural development. The recognition that human societies had existed for far longer periods than traditional chronology suggested required new theoretical frameworks for understanding cultural change and technological progress. Archaeological evidence from sites like Stonehenge played crucial roles in establishing these new chronologies while demonstrating the sophistication of prehistoric achievements that challenged existing assumptions about cultural evolution. The development of systematic excavation techniques during the 19th century reflected growing recognition that buried archaeological deposits contained information about past societies that could not be recovered through surface observation alone. The stratigraphic principles developed by geologists provided models for understanding the temporal relationships between different archaeological layers, while advances in artifact analysis offered new methods for interpreting material culture and cultural change. These methodological innovations would transform archaeological practice while establishing the scientific foundations that would guide modern prehistoric research. The transformation of Stonehenge studies from antiquarian speculation to rigorous scientific archaeology began in earnest with William Hawley's systematic excavations between 1919 and 1926. Hawley, a retired military officer turned archaeologist, brought military precision and organisational skills to what would become the first comprehensive archaeological investigation of the monument. His work marked a decisive break from the limited trenching and artefact collecting that had characterised earlier investigations, establishing new standards for site documentation and stratigraphic analysis that would influence British archaeology for decades. Hawley's excavation methodology reflected the emerging scientific approaches that were transforming archaeological practice during the early 20th century. Rather than focusing on specific features or artefact types, his team undertook systematic excavation of large areas within the monument, carefully recording the vertical relationships between different archaeological deposits and documenting the precise locations of all recovered materials. This stratigraphic approach allowed Hawley to identify distinct phases of construction and use that had been invisible to earlier investigators who lacked systematic excavation techniques. The scale of Hawley's excavations was unprecedented in British prehistoric archaeology, involving the removal of approximately half of the total archaeological deposits within the stone circle and earthwork enclosure. His team excavated 30 of the 56 Aubrey holes, substantial portions of the inner monument area, and sections of the surrounding ditch and bank system. This extensive work required careful coordination of multiple excavation teams, sophisticated recording systems, and substantial financial resources that demonstrated the growing institutional support for scientific archaeological research. The discoveries made during Hawley's excavations revolutionized understanding of Stonehenge's construction history and cultural significance. His systematic investigation of the Aubrey holes revealed that these features had served as repositories for cremated human remains over extended periods, with multiple burial episodes occurring within individual holes. The cremation deposits contained bone fragments from dozens of individuals, representing one of Britain's largest prehistoric cremation cemeteries and providing direct evidence for the monument's mortuary functions during its earliest phases. Chemical analysis of the cremated bone fragments recovered by Hawley's team revealed sophisticated cremation practices that involved careful temperature control and selective bone collection. The cremations had been conducted at temperatures exceeding 800 degrees Celsius, indicating the use of specially constructed pyres that required substantial fuel resources and technical expertise. The bone fragments showed evidence of deliberate sorting and selection, with specific anatomical elements chosen for burial, while others were presumably disposed of elsewhere or retained for other ritual purposes. The pottery assemblages recovered during Hawley's excavations provided crucial evidence for dating the monument's various construction phases and identifying the cultural groups responsible for its development. The ceramic sequences revealed continuous use of the site from the late Neolithic period through the Bronze Age, with distinct pottery traditions corresponding to different phases of architectural development. The presence of grooved ware pottery in the earliest levels confirmed the monument's Neolithic origins, while Beaker pottery from later contexts documented the cultural transitions that accompanied the Sarsen stone construction phases. Hawley's investigation of the stone settings within the monument revealed the complex sequence of bluestone arrangements that had preceded the final configuration visible to modern visitors. His excavation of stone holes and packing deposits demonstrated that the bluestones had been erected, dismantled, and rearranged multiple times during the monument's active use period. This discovery of multiple bluestone phases challenged earlier assumptions about the monument's construction history, while revealing the dynamic nature of prehistoric ritual practices. The documentation techniques employed during Hawley's excavations established new standards for archaeological recording that would influence British fieldwork methodology throughout the 20th century. His team produced detailed plans showing the precise locations of all excavated features, comprehensive photographic records of excavation progress, and systematic catalogues of recovered artefacts. These records, though sometimes lacking the detail that modern archaeologists would require, provided the most complete documentation of Stonehenge's archaeological deposits that had been attempted to that date. Despite the groundbreaking nature of Hawley's work, his excavations also revealed the limitations of early 20th century archaeological methodology. The absence of reliable dating techniques meant that chronological relationships between different features remained largely speculative, while the lack of comparative data from other sites made cultural interpretations tentative. Environmental archaeology was still in its infancy, so important information about ancient climate, vegetation, and subsistence practices was not systematically collected or analysed. Richard Atkinson's investigations at Stonehenge during the 1950s and 1960s built upon Hawley's pioneering work while introducing new methodological approaches that reflected advances in archaeological science during the mid-20th century. Atkinson, a professional archaeologist with extensive experience in British prehistory, brought theoretical sophistication and technical expertise that allowed him to address questions that had remained unresolved since Hawley's excavations. His work focused particularly on understanding the monument's construction techniques and chronological development through careful analysis of structural evidence and artefact assemblages. Atkinson's most significant contribution to Stonehenge studies involved his detailed analysis of the Sarsen stone construction techniques and the engineering methods used to erect the massive trilithons. His investigation of the stone holes, joint systems, and surface treatments revealed the sophisticated carpentry techniques that had been adapted for stone construction, including mortise and tenon joints, tongue and groove connections, and carefully calculated load distributions. These discoveries demonstrated that the monument's builders possessed engineering knowledge that rivaled contemporary achievements in other parts of Europe. The experimental archaeology conducted under Atkinson's direction provided crucial insights into the practical challenges of megalithic construction and the labour requirements for different phases of monument building. His team's attempts to move replica Sarsen stones using reconstructed prehistoric techniques revealed that transporting the largest stones would have required coordinated efforts by several hundred people, while erecting the trilithons would have demanded sophisticated lifting systems and precise positioning techniques. These experiments established minimum estimates for the workforce and time requirements that helped quantify the social investment represented by the monument's construction. Atkinson's analysis of the bluestone arrangements within the monument revealed additional evidence for the complex sequence of modifications that had characterized the site's development. His excavation of previously unexplored stone holes demonstrated that the current bluestone configuration represented only the final phase of a series of arrangements that had evolved over several centuries. The discovery of bluestone chips and fragments in various locations around the site indicated that the stones had been repeatedly moved, reshaped, and repositioned according to changing ritual requirements. The dating evidence assembled during Atkinson's excavations provided the first reliable chronological framework for understanding Stonehenge's development sequence. Radiocarbon dating, newly available during the 1950s, allowed Atkinson to establish absolute dates for different construction phases that confirmed the monument's great antiquity, while revealing the extended timespan over which it had been built and modified. These dates demonstrated that Stonehenge's construction had begun during the late Neolithic period and continued through the early Bronze Age, spanning more than 1,500 years of continuous development. The cultural interpretations developed by Atkinson reflected mid-20th century archaeological theory that emphasized migration and cultural diffusion as primary mechanisms of cultural change. His analysis of artefact assemblages and architectural techniques led him to propose that different phases of Stonehenge construction reflected the arrival of new populations with distinct cultural traditions and technological capabilities. The Bluestone phase was attributed to migrants from Wales, while the Sarsen construction was linked to Beaker culture influences from continental Europe. Atkinson's work also established new standards for public presentation of archaeological research through his popular writings and media appearances that brought Stonehenge studies to broader audiences. His books and television programs explained complex archaeological evidence in accessible terms while maintaining scientific accuracy and methodological rigour. This public engagement helped establish archaeology as a legitimate scientific discipline while generating public support for continued research and conservation efforts at important prehistoric sites. The limitations of Atkinson's work became apparent during subsequent decades, as new methodological approaches revealed the complexity of factors that had influenced Stonehenge's development. His emphasis on migration and cultural replacement underestimated the role of local populations in monument construction, while his focus on architectural sequences neglected important aspects of ritual practice and symbolic meaning. Environmental factors, social organisation, and economic systems received limited attention in interpretations that prioritise cultural historical narratives over broader anthropological analysis. The Stonehenge Riverside project, initiated in 2003 under the direction of Mike Parker Pearson, represents the most comprehensive archaeological investigation of the monument and its surrounding landscape ever undertaken. This international research collaboration brought together specialists from multiple disciplines to address fundamental questions about Stonehenge's purpose, construction, and cultural significance using advanced scientific techniques that had been unavailable to earlier investigators. The project's scope extended far beyond the monument itself to encompass the entire ritual landscape of the Salisbury Plain. The theoretical framework guiding the Stonehenge Riverside project reflected contemporary archaeological approaches that emphasised landscape archaeology, social complexity, and the integration of multiple lines of evidence to understand past societies. Rather than focusing primarily on the monument's architectural development, the project investigated the broader social, economic, and religious systems that had made such ambitious construction projects possible. This holistic approach required collaboration between archaeologists, geologists, chemists, astronomers, and other specialists who contributed different types of expertise to the research effort. The excavation techniques employed by the Stonehenge Riverside project incorporated the most advanced methodological approaches available to modern archaeology. High-precision surveying equipment allowed researchers to record the exact positions of all archaeological features and artefacts, while sophisticated sampling strategies ensured that environmental and dating evidence was systematically collected. Digital documentation systems created comprehensive databases that could be analysed using statistical techniques and computer modelling approaches that revealed patterns invisible to traditional analytical methods. The project's investigation of the cremation cemetery within Stonehenge revealed the full extent of the monument's mortuary functions and the sophisticated burial practices that had been conducted there over many centuries. Systematic excavation and analysis of cremated remains from across the site demonstrated that the cemetery had contained the burials of at least 150 individuals, making it one of Britain's largest prehistoric cremation cemeteries. The burials spanned the entire period of the monument's active use, from approximately 3000 to 1600 BC. Advanced analytical techniques applied to the cremated remains provided unprecedented insights into the origins and characteristics of the people buried at Stonehenge. Strontium isotope analysis revealed that many individuals had grown up in regions far from Salisbury Plain, with isotopic signatures indicating origins in Wales, Scotland, and continental Europe. This evidence for long-distance mobility demonstrated that Stonehenge had attracted visitors and participants from across prehistoric Europe, confirming its status as a monument of international significance. Osteological analysis of the cremated bone fragments revealed demographic patterns and health conditions that provided insights into the social composition of the burial population. The burials included individuals of all ages and both sexes, though adult males were somewhat overrepresented compared to normal demographic patterns. Evidence for healed injuries and chronic health conditions suggested that some individuals buried at Stonehenge may have been seeking healing or had achieved special status due to their physical conditions. The Stonehenge Riverside project's investigation of the monument's construction sequence confirmed and refined the chronological framework established by earlier researchers, while revealing additional phases of development that had not been previously recognised. High-precision radiocarbon dating of organic materials from secure archaeological contexts provided accurate dates for different construction episodes, while stratigraphic analysis revealed the complex relationships between various architectural elements. These investigations demonstrated that the monument's development had been even more complex and extended than previously understood. The project's analysis of the Sarsen stone construction revealed new evidence for these sophisticated engineering techniques and organisational capabilities required for the Trilithon construction phase. Laser scanning of the stones documented surface treatments, joint systems and construction marks that provided detailed information about stoneworking techniques and assembly procedures. This evidence confirmed that the Sarsen construction represented one of the most ambitious architectural projects undertaken in prehistoric Europe. Revolutionary advances in scientific dating and analytical techniques have transformed understanding of Stonehenge's chronology and the cultural processes that shaped its development. Radiocarbon dating, refined through improved calibration curves and statistical analysis, now provides precise dates for different construction phases that allow archaeologists to correlate monument development with broader patterns of cultural change across prehistoric Europe. These dating advances have revealed that Stonehenge's construction coincided with periods of significant social and economic transformation that affected societies across the continent. Isotope analysis has emerged as one of the most powerful tools for understanding the origins and mobility patterns of people associated with Stonehenge. Strontium isotope signatures in human teeth and bones reflect the geological environments where individuals spent their childhood years, allowing researchers to identify migrants and trace population movements across prehistoric landscapes. Oxygen isotope analysis provides additional information about climate and seasonal mobility patterns, while carbon and nitrogen isotopes reveal dietary practices and subsistence strategies. The application of isotope analysis to cremated remains from Stonehenge has revealed the international character of the monument's user community and the extensive networks of cultural exchange that connected prehistoric European societies. The discovery that many individuals buried at the site had grown up in distant regions demonstrates that Stonehenge's reputation extended far beyond Britain and attracted participants from across the known world of prehistoric Europe. These findings have fundamentally altered understanding of prehistoric mobility and cultural interaction. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted around Stonehenge have revealed the existence of numerous previously unknown archaeological features that demonstrate the monument's integration within a much larger ritual landscape. These surveys have identified buried stone circles, timber structures, pit alignments, and other ceremonial features that extend the monument complex far beyond the visible stone circle. The discovery of these hidden structures has revealed that Stonehenge was only one component of an extensive sacred landscape that encompassed several square miles of the Salisbury Plain. The buried monuments detected through geophysical survey include timber circles that may have preceded the stone constructions, linear arrangements of pits that appear to have astronomical alignments, and earthwork features that connected different components of the ritual landscape. These discoveries demonstrate that the area around Stonehenge was intensively used for ceremonial purposes over extended periods, with new monuments being added and existing features being modified according to changing ritual requirements and social needs. Magnetometer surveys have revealed the full extent of the avenue and identified additional linear features that may represent other processional routes connecting Stonehenge to different parts of the surrounding landscape. These surveys have also detected areas of intense burning that may represent locations where cremation ceremonies were conducted, along with concentrations of pottery and other artifacts that indicate areas of particularly intensive ritual activity. The discovery of Durrington Walls, located approximately 2 miles northeast of Stonehenge, has provided crucial insights into the domestic and ceremonial activities that supported the monument's construction and use. This massive henge monument, nearly 10 times larger than Stonehenge itself, contained substantial timber circles and extensive evidence for large-scale feasting and ceremonial activities. Excavations at Durrington Walls have revealed that it served as a complementary site to Stonehenge, possibly functioning as a place for the living while Stonehenge was reserved for the dead. The timber circles at Durrington Walls, known as the Southern and Northern Circles, were constructed using massive oak posts arranged in concentric rings that created impressive wooden temples comparable in scale to the stone structures at Stonehenge. Dendrochronological analysis of the preserved timber fragments has provided precise dates for the construction of these circles, revealing that they were built during the same period as the Sarsen stone phase at Stonehenge. This contemporaneity suggests that the two sites functioned as paired monuments within a unified ceremonial system. Evidence for large-scale feasting at Durrington Walls includes enormous quantities of animal bones, pottery vessels, and food preparation facilities that indicate the site hosted gatherings, involving thousands of participants. Analysis of the animal remains reveals that cattle and pigs were brought to the site from across Britain, while pottery assemblages include vessels from multiple regional traditions. The scale of these feasting activities demonstrates the massive social coordination and resource mobilisation that characterised the communities responsible for Stonehenge's construction. The discovery of Woodhenge, another timber circle located near Durrington Walls, has provided additional evidence for the complex ceremonial landscape that surrounded Stonehenge. This monument consisted of 6 concentric rings of wooden posts arranged around a central burial, creating a wooden temple that may have served specific ritual functions within the broader ceremonial system. The careful positioning of Woodhenge in relation to other monuments in the landscape suggests that its builders understood and worked within established patterns of sacred geography. The Stonehenge Hidden Landscape Project, utilising advanced geophysical survey techniques, has revealed the full extent of the prehistoric monuments and features that surround Stonehenge. This comprehensive survey has identified hundreds of previously unknown archaeological sites, including burial mounds, pit clusters, ceremonial enclosures, and settlement areas that demonstrate the intensive use of the entire region for ritual and domestic purposes over many millennia. The project has created detailed maps showing the distribution and relationships of these sites, revealing patterns of landscape use that were invisible to earlier investigators. The hidden monuments detected through this survey work include cursus monuments, linear earthworks that extend for miles across the landscape and appear to have served processional or territorial functions. The Greater Cursus, already known from earlier investigations, has been revealed as part of a much more extensive system of linear monuments that created formal boundaries and movement corridors across the prehistoric landscape. These discoveries demonstrate that the Stonehenge area was subject to large-scale landscape planning that integrated multiple monuments within unified ceremonial systems. Recent excavations at the newly discovered monuments have provided insights into the chronological development of the entire Stonehenge landscape and the cultural processes that shaped its evolution over time. Many of the hidden monuments appear to predate Stonehenge itself, suggesting that the area had been recognised as sacred and used for ceremonial purposes long before the famous stone circle was constructed. This evidence for landscape continuity helps explain why Stonehenge was built in this particular location and how it fit within existing patterns of ritual activity. The integration of multiple analytical techniques and theoretical approaches has created new synthetic understanding of Stonehenge that emphasizes its role within broader systems of prehistoric social organization, religious practice, and cultural development. Yet even as modern archaeology has revealed unprecedented details about the monument's construction and use, Stonehenge faces challenges that would have been unimaginable to its ancient builders. The transformation of this prehistoric temple into one of the world's most visited heritage sites has created complex tensions between preservation, access, interpretation, and ongoing research that define its contemporary existence. The designation of Stonehenge as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1986 represented formal international recognition of the monument's outstanding universal value, while establishing legal frameworks for its protection and management. The World Heritage listing encompasses not only the stone circle itself, but also the broader archaeological landscape of the Salisbury Plain, including Avebury and its associated monuments. This comprehensive designation acknowledges that Stonehenge cannot be understood in isolation, but must be appreciated as part of a larger prehistoric sacred landscape that represents one of humanity's most remarkable achievements in monumental architecture and landscape planning. The World Heritage status brought both benefits and challenges that continue to shape how Stonehenge is managed and experienced by contemporary visitors. International recognition increased global awareness of the monument's significance, while providing access to conservation expertise and funding sources that might not otherwise have been available. However, World Heritage designation also imposed strict conservation requirements that limit the types of research and development activities that can be conducted within the protected area, creating ongoing tensions between preservation and investigation. Modern conservation challenges at Stonehenge reflect the complex interactions between ancient materials, environmental conditions, and human activities that threaten the monument's long-term survival. The Sarsen stones, despite their apparent durability, show evidence of ongoing weathering processes that have accelerated due to air pollution, acid rain, and climate change. Chemical analysis of stone surfaces reveals that industrial emissions have altered the pH levels of rainwater, creating more aggressive weathering conditions than the stones experienced during most of their 400-500-year history. The bluestones face different but equally serious conservation challenges due to their varied geological compositions and the different weathering rates of the multiple rock types represented in the monument. Some bluestone varieties are particularly susceptible to freeze-thaw cycles that have become more frequent due to climate change, while others are affected by biological weathering caused by lichens and other organisms that colonize stone surfaces. Conservation specialists have developed detailed monitoring programs that track weathering rates and environmental conditions to identify stones requiring immediate intervention. Visitor impact represents one of the most significant ongoing threats to Stonehenge's physical integrity and archaeological deposits. The monument attracts over 1 million visitors annually, creating levels of foot traffic that far exceed anything experienced during its prehistoric use. Ground compaction from visitor footfall has damaged archaeological deposits while creating drainage problems that affect the stability of the stone settings. Erosion of the chalk bedrock around the stone bases has required ongoing stabilization work to prevent structural damage to the trilithons. The development of the new Stonehenge Visitor Centre in 2013 represented a comprehensive response to the challenges of managing mass tourism while protecting the monument's integrity and enhancing visitor understanding. The new facility, located 1.5 miles from the stone circle, removes the visual intrusion of the previous visitor infrastructure while providing sophisticated interpretation facilities that prepare visitors for their encounter with the monument. The centre's design incorporates sustainable building technologies and landscape integration that minimise environmental impact while accommodating large numbers of visitors. The visitor centre's interpretation galleries utilise cutting-edge display technologies to present the latest archaeological discoveries and theoretical interpretations in accessible formats that serve diverse international audiences. Interactive exhibits allow visitors to explore virtual reconstructions of different construction phases, examine high-resolution images of artifacts and features invisible to casual observation, and understand the monument's astronomical alignments through computer simulations. These technological approaches provide educational experiences that would be impossible to achieve at the monument itself, while reducing pressure on the archaeological site. The new visitor management system includes timed entry tickets that regulate the number of people accessing the stone circle at any given time, helping to reduce crowding while ensuring that all visitors have meaningful encounters with the monument. Special access arrangements allow smaller groups to enter the stone circle itself during carefully controlled periods, providing intimate experiences with the monument while limiting the total impact on archaeological deposits. These access programs generate revenue that supports ongoing conservation work while satisfying visitor demand for closer encounters with the stones. Transportation between the visitor centre and the monument utilises electric shuttle buses that eliminate vehicle emissions from the immediate vicinity of the stones, while providing commentary that enhances visitor understanding during the journey. The shuttle system also removes the visual and auditory intrusion of private vehicles from the monument setting, allowing visitors to experience something closer to the acoustic and visual environment that would have characterised the site during prehistoric periods. Current archaeological research at Stonehenge continues to reveal new aspects of the monument's construction, use and significance despite more than a century of intensive investigation. The application of increasingly sophisticated analytical techniques to previously excavated materials has generated fresh insights into questions that seemed settled by earlier research. Advances in radiocarbon dating precision have refined chronological sequences, while new approaches to artifact analysis have revealed manufacturing techniques and use patterns that were invisible to earlier investigators. Recent analysis of cremated bone fragments using advanced osteological techniques has revealed previously unrecognized demographic patterns within the burial population that provide new insights into the social organization of the communities that use Stonehenge. Statistical analysis of age and sex distributions, pathological conditions, and isotopic signatures has identified distinct burial episodes that may correspond to specific historical events or ceremonial occasions. These findings suggest that access to burial within Stonehenge was more carefully regulated than previously understood, with specific criteria governing who could be interred within the sacred precinct. The ongoing analysis of the Amesbury Archer and other high-status burials discovered near Stonehenge has revealed new evidence for the international networks that connected prehistoric European elites. Recent isotope studies have identified additional individuals whose childhood origins lay in distant regions, while analysis of grave goods has revealed manufacturing techniques and material sources that demonstrate extensive cultural exchange. These discoveries continue to expand understanding of the geographical scope and cultural diversity of the communities that participated in Stonehenge's construction and use. Environmental archaeology has emerged as an increasingly important component of Stonehenge research, providing insights into the landscape conditions and ecological contexts that influenced the monument's development. Analysis of ancient pollen, seeds and other plant remains preserved in archaeological deposits has revealed detailed information about vegetation changes, climate fluctuations, and human impact on the environment surrounding the monument. These environmental data help explain why particular locations were chosen for monument construction and how changing ecological conditions influence patterns of use over time. Recent palynological studies have revealed that the Stonehenge landscape underwent significant deforestation during the Neolithic period, with woodland clearance creating the open grassland environment that characterises the area today. This deforestation appears to have been deliberately undertaken to create appropriate settings for monument construction and the large gatherings that these sites accommodated. The scale of landscape modification required for these clearances demonstrates the substantial environmental impact of prehistoric monument building activities. Analysis of ancient DNA extracted from human remains at Stonehenge has provided revolutionary insights into the genetic ancestry and population relationships of the monument's users. Recent studies have revealed genetic connections between individuals buried at Stonehenge and populations across prehistoric Europe, confirming the isotopic evidence for long-distance mobility while providing additional detail about migration patterns and cultural interactions. These genetic studies have also identified family relationships between some individuals buried at the site, suggesting that kinship played important roles in determining access to burial within the monument. The application of advanced imaging techniques to the Stonehenge stones has revealed previously invisible surface features that provide new information about construction techniques and symbolic meanings. High-resolution 3D scanning has documented tool marks, joint systems, and surface treatments with unprecedented precision, while specialized lighting techniques have revealed faint carvings and markings that had been overlooked by earlier investigators. These technological approaches continue to generate new data about the monument's construction and decoration, even after centuries of study. Recent discoveries of carved images on the Sarsen stones have attracted particular attention from researchers seeking to understand the symbolic systems employed by Stonehenge's builders. The identification of axe and dagger carvings on several stones has provided direct evidence for the symbolic associations between the monument and Bronze Age weaponry and tool traditions. These carvings appear to have been added during different periods of the monument's use, suggesting that the stones served as canvases for symbolic expression over extended periods. Astronomical research at Stonehenge continues to reveal new aspects of the monument's relationship to celestial phenomena and its functions as an observational instrument. Computer modelling of ancient sky conditions has confirmed the precision of the monument's solar alignments, while identifying additional lunar and stellar alignments that may have been significant to its builders. These studies have also revealed that the monument's astronomical functions would have changed over time due to long-term variations in celestial mechanics, requiring periodic adjustments to maintain observational accuracy. Recent investigations of the monument's acoustic properties have revealed that the stone circle was designed to enhance sound transmission and create distinctive audio effects during ceremonies. Acoustic modelling has demonstrated that the trilithons would have amplified and focused sounds generated within the circle while creating echo effects that would have enhanced the drama of ritual performances. These acoustic properties suggest that sound played important roles in the ceremonies conducted at Stonehenge, with the monument serving as both visual and auditory theatre for prehistoric religious activities. The discovery of previously unknown monuments in the Stonehenge landscape continues through ongoing geophysical surveys that utilise increasingly sophisticated detection technologies. Recent surveys have identified additional timber circles, pit alignments, and earthwork features that extend the known extent of the prehistoric ceremonial complex. These discoveries demonstrate that the Stonehenge landscape was even more densely occupied by monuments than previously recognised, with new sites being added continuously over many centuries of use. The Superhenge discovery at Durrington Walls in 2015 exemplified the potential for major new findings to emerge from ongoing landscape investigations. This massive stone circle, buried beneath the bank of the later Henge monument, consists of up to 90 standing stones, arranged in a circle over 500 metres in diameter. the discovery of Superhenge demonstrates that the Stonehenge area contained multiple major stone circles and suggests that the visible monuments represent only a fraction of the prehistoric ceremonial infrastructure that once existed in this landscape. Unresolved questions about Stonehenge's purpose continue to generate scholarly debate and public fascination despite centuries of investigation. While archaeological evidence clearly demonstrates that the monument served multiple functions, burial ground, ceremonial centre, astronomical observatory, and pilgrimage destination, the relative importance of these different roles and their relationships to broader prehistoric religious and social systems remain subjects of ongoing research and interpretation. The question of Stonehenge's primary purpose reflects broader challenges in prehistoric archaeology, where material evidence must be interpreted without the benefit of written records or direct cultural continuity. The monument's multifunctional character and extended period of use mean that different purposes may have predominated during different phases of its development. While the meanings and significance attributed to the site by its users may have evolved continuously over the 1,500 years of its active use. Recent theoretical approaches to understanding Stonehenge have emphasized its role as a place of healing and pilgrimage that attracted visitors seeking physical and spiritual renewal. The high proportion of individuals with physical disabilities among those buried at the site, combined with evidence for long-distance travel by monument users, suggests that Stonehenge developed a reputation as a healing centre, where the stones themselves were believed to possess therapeutic properties. This interpretation aligns with medieval traditions about the healing powers of the blue stones, and provides frameworks for understanding why people would have undertaken difficult journeys to reach the monument. The identity of Stonehenge's builders remains another fundamental question that continues to evolve as new archaeological evidence emerges. While the monument was clearly constructed by multiple cultural groups over many centuries, the specific social and political organizations responsible for different construction phases remain poorly understood. Recent research has emphasized the international character of the communities involved in Stonehenge's construction, with evidence for participants from across prehistoric Europe contributing to the monument's development. The social mechanisms that enabled the massive labour mobilisation required for Stonehenge's construction represent ongoing puzzles for archaeologists seeking to understand prehistoric social organisation. The coordination of hundreds or thousands of workers for extended construction projects would have required sophisticated leadership structures, resource management systems, and ideological frameworks that motivated participation in these enormous collective undertakings. Understanding how prehistoric societies accomplished such feats provides insights into the organisational capabilities and social complexity of Neolithic and Bronze Age communities. Stonehenge's place in understanding Neolithic and Bronze Age Britain continues to expand as new discoveries reveal the monument's connections to broader patterns of cultural development across prehistoric Europe. The site serves as a crucial reference point for understanding the transition from Neolithic farming communities to Bronze Age hierarchical societies, while its international connections illuminate the extensive networks of cultural exchange that linked prehistoric European populations. The monument's extended period of use provides a unique window onto cultural continuity and change over more than a millennium of prehistoric development. The ongoing mysteries surrounding Stonehenge reflect both the limitations of archaeological evidence and the monument's genuine complexity as a cultural phenomenon that evolved continuously over many centuries. Future research will undoubtedly continue to reveal new aspects of the monument's construction, use, and significance while raising fresh questions about the remarkable achievements of its prehistoric builders. As archaeological techniques become increasingly sophisticated and new theoretical approaches emerge, Stonehenge will continue to serve as a laboratory for understanding the capabilities and accomplishments of prehistoric European civilization. Today, Stonehenge stands as both ancient monument and modern heritage site, its weathered stones bearing witness to over 4,500 years of human interaction with this sacred landscape. The trilithons that once echoed with Bronze Age ceremonies now overlook car parks and visitor facilities, while the same astronomical alignments that guided prehistoric rituals continue to draw crowds of modern observers seeking connection with Britain's mysterious past. The monument's transformation from active religious centre to protected heritage site reflects broader changes in how contemporary societies understand and value their archaeological inheritance, balancing preservation with access, research with tourism, and ancient mysteries with modern knowledge. The enduring fascination with Stonehenge demonstrates the monument's continued power to inspire wonder and speculation about the achievements of our prehistoric ancestors. Despite centuries of investigation that have revealed unprecedented details about its construction and use, fundamental questions about its builders' motivations and beliefs remain tantalizingly unanswered. This combination of detailed knowledge and persistent mystery ensures that Stonehenge will continue to captivate future generations, while serving as a testament to the remarkable capabilities and aspirations of the prehistoric communities who created one of humanity's most enduring architectural achievements.